The room went still. The kind of stillness that makes a person feel like the air got sucked out of the building. 32 students in Ms. Wexler's advanced algebra class stared up front at the new substitute, a tall, khaki-clad man in his late 40s with a permanent frown stitched across his forehead. His name, as written on the board in smug capital letters, was Mr. Whitaker. Jaden Moore sat in the back row, slouched with his hoodie half over his head, scribbling something in the corner of his notebook. Not notes. Definitely not the warm-up exercise. If you looked close enough, you'd see complicated diagrams and equations no high schooler had any business doodling during third period math. Anyone? Mr. Whitaker asked again, his voice laced with sarcasm. This is basic imaginary numbers. Come on, even Google knows this. The class chuckled nervously. It wasn't that they didn't know, okay, most of them didn't, but it was the way he asked. Condescending. Like he already expected them to fail. Mr. Whitaker started pacing slowly. Maybe I should rephrase. Is there anyone not currently using their phone who has at least one brain cell available for this? Someone in the front snorted. The kid next to Jaden whispered, "This dude's a clown." Jaden didn't respond. He didn't look up. But a smirk tugged at the edge of his lips. "All right," Whitaker said, turning back toward the board. "Guess I'll walk you through it. Square root of -1, folks, is I. The imaginary unit. Super basic stuff. I assumed at least one of you would know." "It's I," Jaden interrupted, not even lifting his eyes. The class froze. The only sound was a mechanical pencil rolling off a desk. Mr. Whitaker turned, slowly. "What did you say?" Jaden sighed like he was being asked to repeat something beneath him. "The square root of -1 is I, imaginary unit. It's part of the complex number system. You learn it when you stop pretending high school math is hard." The class oat. A couple kids laughed under their breath. The substitute's face twitched. "And who are you?" Whitaker asked, walking slowly toward the back. "Our resident genius." Jaden leaned back and finally looked up. His brown eyes were sharp, aware. Not cocky. Just awake in a room full of students trying to sleep through life. "Jaden Moore," he said casually. "I sit back here so I don't make other people feel bad." Laughter erupted again, louder this time. Mr. Whitaker didn't laugh. His jaw clenched. His eyes narrowed. "Jaden Moore," he repeated. "Well, Mr. Moore, let's see how smart you really are." He grabbed a dry erase marker and scribbled a string of numbers and symbols across the board. A long, nasty, SAT-style equation involving exponential decay and logarithmic functions. Most of the class looked at it like it was alien language. Jaden blinked. Once. "You've got 2 minutes, Whitaker said, stepping aside. Jaden pulled his hoodie all the way down now and stretched his neck. "Do I get a calculator?" "Do you need one?" Whitaker replied, arms folded. Jaden stared at the board. His fingers drummed the side of his desk. And then. "No calculator," Jaden said. "Don't need one." He didn't reach for a pencil. Just sat still, staring at the numbers like he was watching something in motion. Then, just under 30 seconds later. X equals 2.34, rounded to 2 decimal places. Assuming natural log base e. Whitaker blinked. "What?" Jaden leaned forward. "You want me to explain it step by step?" Someone near the window burst out laughing. "Bro, what?" Whitaker turned back to the board, ran the equation through his head, then over to the calculator on his phone. 2.34. The exact same result. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was awe. Jaden didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just went back to sketching in his notebook like nothing happened. Whitaker cleared his throat and walked back up front. "Right. Well. That's correct. A kid in the front whispered, he just cooked you in 30 seconds. Whitaker ignored it. Jaden's classmate Malik leaned in from the desk behind him. Yo, since when were you Einstein with a fade? Jaden didn't respond. Because this wasn't new. This was just the first time anybody had noticed. That night, a video clip from someone's phone hit TikTok. The caption read, "When the substitute tries to clown a student but he's secretly smarter than the whole school, exploding head #Jaden Moore #Genius Alert." Within hours, it had over 40,000 views. By morning, the comments started rolling in. Dude is different. Bet he's gonna end up at MIT. Why he looked like he just woke up and solved calculus LMAO. And the one that hit Jaden hardest. No way he goes to that school. He's too smart for that zip code. Back in the classroom the next day, things were different. People stared. Some respectfully. Some suspiciously. The principal even stopped by to shake Jaden's hand and asked if he'd ever considered academic competitions. Jaden just shrugged. Kinda busy trying to graduate without losing my mind. Mr. Whitaker returned that day too. Quiet. Less smug. He gave no pop quizzes, no jabs. During lunch, he pulled Jaden aside. You ever take a real IQ test? He asked. Jaden raised an eyebrow. Why? I've taught for 20 years, Whitaker said. I've seen a lot of smart kids. But what you did yesterday, that was different. Jaden hesitated. IQ doesn't mean much when the world sees you as a statistic. Whitaker didn't argue. But he handed Jaden a folded sheet of paper. It was an invitation to a regional gifted youth program, one that partnered with testing institutions. A chance to prove, on paper, what Jaden already knew. At home that night, Jaden sat at the kitchen table while chaos spun around him, two of his younger brothers wrestling on the floor, his baby sister crying in her high chair, and the smell of spicy jollof rice simmering in the pot. His mom, worn out from her night shift, kissed him on the head. You good, Jay? She asked. Yeah, he said, hiding the paper under a math book. Just school stuff. But deep down, something had shifted. He'd spent years hiding his mind because he thought no one would care, or worse, use it against him. Now, someone was paying attention. And it terrified him. Because if they saw him, really saw him, would they lift him up? Or try to break him down? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before he was that genius kid on TikTok, Jaden Moore was just another black boy on the South Side, except, he wasn't. People saw the hoodie, the silence, the sidelong glances, and assumed the usual, troublemaker, underachiever, maybe smart, but probably too lazy to apply himself. What they didn't see, what they never looked close enough to notice, was that Jaden had already rewired a microwave into a Wi-Fi booster by the age of 11. And he never even told anybody. Aiden was born in the back room of a two-bedroom apartment on 71st and Cottage Grove, during one of the worst snowstorms in Chicago's history. His parents, Kwame and Abina Moore, had immigrated from Ghana 6 years earlier, chasing the American dream with more hope than cash and more grit than privilege. Kwame fixed cars, from rusted sedans to busted engines, anything people could barely afford to keep running. Abina worked the night shift at Mercy Hospital, cleaning surgical floors before sunrise, then packing school lunches before her own breakfast. They had 5 kids. Jaden was the oldest. He was the one who turned off the stove, braided his sister's hair, and translated bank letters when his mom was too tired to read. He was the one who stayed up helping the twins with homework even when he hadn't touched his own. He didn't complain. He calculated how many hours it would take his dad to fix a Lexus and earn enough for groceries. How many paychecks before they could afford a second laptop. How long until the electric bill was due, and how to hack the smart meter to buy them a few more days of light. By 12, Jaden wasn't just smart, he was strategic. And being strategic meant never letting people know how smart he really was. It started back in 4th grade, when Jaden corrected his teacher's math during a lesson. "Actually, Miss Thomas," he said, raising his hand politely. "You forgot to invert the reciprocal when dividing fractions." Instead of thanking him, she told him to be quiet and stop trying to embarrass the class. That day, he learned something important. Smart was fine, as long as it didn't make adults look bad. So he stopped raising his hand. Started hiding the extra books he checked out from the library. Started acting confused during class and acing the test anyway. It was easier that way. Safer. Until now. The day after the viral video, Jaden came home to find his uncle Kojo on the couch, laughing at his phone. "Ei. This is you, Jaden. Eh. Look at you, making this old teacher scratch his head. I always say you have your grandfather's brain. Remember Papa Mensa? He could do calculations in his sleep." Jaden smiled politely. His uncle meant well, loud, loving, and overly proud. But Jaden knew better than to let a moment of praise distract him. Online fame came fast. But it disappeared even faster. Especially for kids who looked like him. Later that night, after dinner and dishes and helping his little brother with vocabulary flashcards, Jaden pulled out a small black notebook from under his mattress. Inside were diagrams, notes, dreams. A sketch of a quantum circuit. Ideas for an app that could use facial recognition to detect emotional changes in autistic children, inspired by his cousin Kwesi. And on the last page. Goals before 18. 1. Score 1550 plus on the SAT. 2. Learn C++, Python, and Swift fluently. 3. Intern at a tech startup. 4. Win something. Anything. 5. Get out. Go somewhere I can breathe. The only person who ever saw that notebook was his little sister, Alma. She was 9, curious, and had a habit of sneaking into Jaden's room pretending to clean, just to peek at what he was building next. "You gonna be famous one day," she whispered once. Jaden had chuckled. "I don't want to be famous." "Then what?" He paused. "I want to matter." But not everyone understood him. Not even at home. His dad loved him, no doubt, but often mistook Jaden's silence for disrespect. "You think too much," Kwame would grumble. "You should be out playing football like the other boys. Go outside. Touch grass." Jaden didn't argue. But in his head, he was solving problems his father didn't even know existed. One of those problems was belonging. Jaden never fit. Not fully Ghanaian, not fully American. Not hood enough for the neighborhood kids, not safe enough for the teachers who clutched their purses in the hallway. He lived in the in-between. Fluent in code and sarcasm. Raised on jollof and microwave mac and cheese. Too gifted for the system, too poor for private school. That's why he learned to disappear in plain sight. Until last week. Now, after years of shrinking himself, Jaden had gone viral for being exactly what he tried to hide, brilliant. And he didn't know what scared him more, being ignored, or being seen. At school, he walked through the halls with earbuds in, pretending not to hear the whispers. "He's that kid, right? From TikTok. Bet he's like, Rain Man or something. I heard his IQ's higher than Elon Musk." Rumors. He hated them. Not because they were wrong, but because they reduced him to a headline. Nobody asked about what it felt like to be awake all night because your mom didn't come home yet. Or how it felt to hear your teacher talk about underperforming demographics, while looking you straight in the eye. That afternoon, Jaden sat alone at lunch, something he preferred anyway, when Ms. Elena Ruiz approached. She was one of the science teachers. Young, Latina, sharp. Wore combat boots and hoop earrings and once told the class that physics was just God's graffiti. She didn't sit. Just leaned on the table. I saw the video, she said. Jaden shrugged. Cool. I also read the math. That made him look up. She smiled slightly. You ever heard of the Northside Scholars Program? Nope. It's for kids like you. And no, I don't mean viral famous kids. I mean kids who need a room where no one makes them dumb themselves down. Jaden raised an eyebrow. They meet once a month. Advanced topics. Guest speakers. Real-world labs. You'd like it. Jaden hesitated. That sounds expensive. It's free. He blinked. Nothing's free. She smirked. This is. You just have to show up. She handed him a small card. It had an address, a time, and a contact name. Ms. Ruiz straightened. Think about it. Don't let the world shrink you. Not again. And just like that, she was gone. That night, Jaden lay in bed with the card in one hand and his notebook in the other. He thought about Alma's words. About his mom's tired smile. About the voice in his head that kept saying, this won't last. But maybe, just maybe, it could be the beginning of something. Not fame. Not likes. Freedom. Jaden didn't want to think about the Northside Scholars Program. At least, not yet. He had too many other things to deal with, like how he was going to get through the next few weeks of high school without everything crashing down. It started that morning, in Ms. Wexler's class. She had avoided him since the viral video, until now. When the bell rang and everyone sat down, she called on him in front of the class, her voice not quite as warm as it used to be. Jaden, she said, trying to sound casual, but failing. We need to have a chat about your performance on yesterday's test. A few students snickered. Jaden looked up slowly, his eyes half closed, like he was waking up from a dream. It was his least favorite kind of conversation. You passed, Ms. Wexler continued, but it's, let's just say I've never seen someone solve equations that quickly. Some of the answers were unconventional. The class stared at him. I did it my way, Jaden said flatly, turning back to the window, ignoring the silence that followed. Wexler's voice dropped an octave. I'll be honest, Jaden. It's impressive, but I have concerns. I'm worried you're, under the radar. She glanced around the room. Maybe you could help us set a better example for the rest of the class. Jaden felt the weight of her words like a lead blanket. She wasn't praising him. She wasn't asking for his help. She was subtly telling him that whatever he was doing, it didn't belong in the classroom. He didn't respond. Instead, he went back to the mess of equations he was scribbling in his notebook, the same place where he felt the only peace. Later that day, when the bell rang for lunch, Malik pulled Jaden aside. Malik was his best friend, loud, funny, always down for a good laugh. They'd been through everything together. Football practice, lazy summer days, late-night game sessions, the kind of stuff that built a friendship from the ground up. But now, Malik was looking at him differently. And Jaden didn't like it. You're the talk of the school, bro, Malik said, his voice low. Jaden grunted. Great. Another rumor. Malik raised an eyebrow. It's not a rumor. It's facts. Everyone knows about the video. Even the seniors are talking about you. You're, famous now. I'm not famous, Jaden shot back. I'm just trying to get through the day without becoming a science experiment for everyone to watch. You're that smart, Jaden, Malik continued, shaking his head. You gotta take this seriously. This might be your chance, man. You could be on TV or whatever. He paused. But you can't ignore it. People are gonna start looking at you. Jaden's stomach turned. Look at me for what? What's the point? I don't need their attention. I don't need to be some kind of freak show. Malik looked at him, confused. What are you talking about? People are looking at you. Why not use it? Jaden paused for a second. His mind raced, but he couldn't form the words. It felt like someone else was controlling the situation. He didn't want to be famous. He didn't want people following him around like he was some kind of genius. He just wanted to be himself. But that wasn't an option anymore. At lunch, Jaden grabbed his usual spot by the window, the table in the back where no one bothered him. He unpacked his lunch, carefully spreading out his notes on the table, pretending he wasn't aware of the kids stealing glances at him. They didn't know what to say. They'd seen him in that video, but they weren't sure how to talk to him now. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a group of boys, mostly jocks, mostly loud, whispering and pointing in his direction. They were looking at his phone, laughing. Yo, that's the kid, right? From the TikTok video? What's his deal? One of them asked. The other guy laughed. He's, like, a total brainiac. Doesn't talk to anyone, then goes off on a math test like he's some kind of superhero. Jaden felt the burn of embarrassment creep up his neck, even though he wasn't sure why. He didn't want attention, but now that it was here, he hated the way it felt. They weren't admiring him. They were trying to figure him out. Trying to dissect him like some kind of animal in a cage. It was like that everywhere now. When he left class, he couldn't make it 5 steps down the hall without overhearing something about him. Did you hear? He knows everything about coding. Yo, Jaden Moore got the highest score on the SAT, like, last week. He doesn't even try. How is he so good at everything? Everywhere Jaden went, the whispers followed. It didn't help that Mr. Whitaker, the substitute from the other day, had started following him around like a lost puppy. After class, Mr. Whitaker would pop up out of nowhere and start talking about the Northside Scholars Program or internships at tech firms like Jaden had already signed up for the whole thing. Jaden, you should really think about that program, Whitaker had said, following him down the hallway. I know it might seem overwhelming, but trust me, this is your chance to make a real impact. Jaden ignored him, focusing instead on the ground beneath his feet, trying to walk faster. But Whitaker was persistent. You can be something, Jaden. More than just the kid who aced the math test, Whitaker said, his voice earnest. Think about it. Think about it. That night, when Jaden got home, everything felt like too much. His mom was at work, his dad was fixing a neighbor's car, and the younger kids were running around the apartment, fighting over the remote. Jaden shut himself in his room. The silence felt different tonight. The pressure to be something he wasn't sure he wanted to be was starting to suffocate him. His phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Alma, his little sister. Jaden, you should come to the living room. The news is on. They're talking about you. He stared at the message for a moment, then turned his phone face down. He didn't want to hear what they were saying. He didn't want to be that kid on the news, the one everyone stared at from a distance. But curiosity gnawed at him. He walked into the living room, half pretending he didn't care. The TV was already on, tuned to the local news station. And there, on the screen, was a segment titled, Young Genius from Southside Stuns School with Lightning-Fast Math Skills. Jaden's face appeared on the screen. The video of his interaction with Mr. Whitaker was replayed, cutting between shots of the students in his class watching in awe and a soundbite from Whitaker, who was now singing Jaden's praises. Jaden couldn't hear the words. He couldn't hear anything except the pounding of his heart in his ears. See, Jaden. You're important, Alma said, her voice full of pride. They see you. They know you're special. Jaden didn't respond. He wasn't sure if it felt good anymore. Maybe it never had. Later that night, Jaden sat alone in the dark. He wasn't sure where he was going anymore, not with this new life, not with all the eyes on him. All he wanted was to be left alone. But that was impossible now. He picked up his phone again, staring at the message from Ms. Ruiz, inviting him to the Northside Scholars Program. The program that promised him everything and nothing all at once. Maybe it was time to stop running from everything he was. But maybe it was too late. Jaden woke up the next morning with a sense of unease gnawing at him, the kind of feeling that lingered even after you'd wiped the sleep from your eyes. It wasn't like the usual anxiety that came with school, the quizzes, the forgotten homework, the teachers who didn't get him. It was something deeper. A tension that felt like it was pulling him in two directions at once. "I know you're up, Jaden." Alma's voice echoed from the kitchen, where she was probably already eating cereal and humming some song she'd learned from YouTube. She always did that. Jaden groaned and threw the covers off his legs. It was Saturday, but his younger sister didn't seem to believe in the concept of weekends. Jaden dragged himself out of bed and walked into the kitchen, where Alma greeted him with a big grin, holding up a plate of scrambled eggs that looked suspiciously like they had been burnt. "Eat up," she said. "You're going to need energy today." He glanced at her, eyebrow raised. "What do you mean energy today?" Alma just smiled wider. "You know, for the meeting. The one at that thing. Ms. Ruiz invited you to." Jaden froze, his spoon clinking against the edge of his cereal bowl. It took him a second to process what she was talking about. He had hoped the invitation from Ms. Ruiz to join the Northside Scholars Program was just a passing thought, something he could ignore like the dozens of emails he'd received about scholarships, contests, and talent competitions. But Alma had been relentless, and she was right, it wasn't going away. The choice wasn't just theoretical anymore. He had been sitting on that invitation for a week, turning it over in his head, staring at it in the dark. He couldn't stop thinking about it, even if he tried. The truth was, Jaden had always been the kind of person who ran from anything that might make him stand out too much. His whole life, he'd kept his head down, hiding his abilities, burying his genius beneath layers of sarcasm and apathy. Fame was dangerous. Attention was toxic. He had always seen it in the way people treated the ones who stood out, celebrated for a moment, then discarded when they couldn't keep up with the impossible standards placed on them. But here he was. A kid whose viral video had made him the talk of the school, and now the wider city. Every time he logged into his social media, the notifications didn't stop. People from different parts of Chicago, even across the country, had started following him. Some were in awe, others were jealous, but all of them saw him as someone, who could be the next big thing. And that scared him. Jaden picked up the invitation and looked at it again. The Northside Scholars Program, a chance to be a part of an exclusive group of high-achieving students in Chicago. Mentorship from professionals, internship opportunities, and a network of future leaders in science, technology, and engineering. It sounded like everything Jaden had ever dreamed of, and yet, it felt like a trap. What if it was just another way for people to control him? What if he was good enough on his own, but just didn't fit into their idea of success? Alma, still sitting at the table, watching him closely, finally broke the silence. "You're not like the other kids, Jaden," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You know that, right?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at his sister, who was always so sure of everything. The way she looked at him now, the way her eyes held that quiet confidence, it was something Jaden had never truly seen in himself. Alma always believed in him, always expected him to rise above the challenges life handed him. But Jaden wasn't so sure he could live up to her expectations. "I'm just different," Jaden said finally. "And not in a good way. I don't need people looking at me like I'm some kind of science project." Alma pushed her cereal aside and stood up, walking over to him. "You think they want you because you're a genius," she said softly. "But they want you because you can do things they can't. And that's not something you should hide." The world needs what you have, Jaden. You need to stop running from it. She was right. He'd known that for a while. He'd always been running. Running from being different. Running from expectations. Running from who he really was, the kid who could fix problems no one else even knew existed. But every time he ran, it got harder to breathe. The day dragged on in a haze of thoughts, doubts, and too many unanswered questions. Jaden wandered the apartment, pacing back and forth, trying to convince himself that avoiding the Northside Scholars Program wasn't an option anymore. Maybe he had spent too long trying to keep his head down. Maybe it was time to rise. But to do that, he had to make a choice, embrace the attention, or find a way to push it all away and continue his life as it was. But then again, he thought, maybe there was no turning back. Later that afternoon, after more time spent in his head than he cared to admit, Jaden finally picked up his phone and sent a quick text to Ms. Ruiz. "I'll be there. Saturday, 2 p.m. Jaden felt the weight of his decision immediately. It was like stepping onto a roller coaster, a wild, uncontrollable rush of uncertainty. But there was something exhilarating about it too. Something that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could take control of the direction his life was headed in, instead of letting fate decide. The next morning, Saturday came faster than he expected. Jaden woke up early, dressed in his usual black hoodie and jeans. He didn't feel the need to impress anyone, but at the same time, he wasn't about to show up looking like he hadn't put any thought into it. Alma, of course, was already awake, bouncing around the apartment like she had just won the lottery. "You're really doing it, huh?" she asked, beaming at him as she handed him a granola bar and a bottle of water. Jaden smiled. "I guess I am." The address on the card led him to a building that looked like it belonged in downtown Chicago, sleek, modern, and far removed from the neighborhood he was used to. He hesitated for a moment, standing in front of the door, his hand on the handle. There was no going back now. Taking a deep breath, Jaden pushed the door open. Inside was everything Jaden had imagined, and nothing he had expected. The space was filled with students his age, some chatting amongst themselves, others silently staring at the walls or tapping away at laptops. Ms. Ruiz waved at him from the front of the room, a welcoming smile that, for the first time in a long time, felt genuine. "Jaden," she said as he walked in. "I'm glad you could make it. Welcome to the Northside Scholars Program." And in that moment, Jaden realized something. He wasn't just here because he was the kid who solved the impossible math problem. He was here because he was more than that. He was finally ready to be seen. Jaden walked into the room, his sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and printer ink, a strange mix that seemed to make the atmosphere both formal and relaxed. Around him, small groups of students were scattered, talking in hushed tones, exchanging nervous glances. They all looked like they belonged here, like they had been groomed for this moment their whole lives. But Jaden? He was just the kid who happened to ace a math test and make a viral video, a kid who had never really been the type to fit into the world of high-achieving students. He didn't know if he'd ever feel comfortable here. "Jaden." Ms. Ruiz's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. She was standing at the front of the room, her arms open in greeting. "I'm so glad you could make it. You're going to fit right in." For a moment, Jaden froze. Fit right in? Was she joking? He wasn't sure he'd ever fit in anywhere, and certainly not with kids who looked like they had their lives perfectly planned out, while Jaden was just figuring out how to get through the next hour without breaking down under the weight of everyone's expectations. But Ms. Ruiz was smiling at him, encouraging, so Jaden walked toward her, trying to shake off the knot in his stomach. She gestured toward the group of students sitting around a large table, their heads bent over laptops or notebooks. "These are some of the other students in the program. Why don't you join them? They're just getting started with introductions." Jaden hesitated but nodded, making his way to an empty seat near the back of the room. The moment he sat down, the conversation around him seemed to stop for a split second. Everyone in the room was so polished, the type of students who spoke with confidence, their clothes pressed, their posture straight. They were already deep into discussions about coding languages and upcoming internships, as if they had been living in this world for years. Jaden felt like an outsider. His hoodie was wrinkled, his jeans worn thin at the knees. He didn't have a polished look, and he certainly didn't have the same experience. But here he was, surrounded by people who were already light years ahead of him. One of the students, a girl with glasses and a messy bun, leaned over to him. "You're Jaden, right? From the viral math test video?" Jaden nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, that's me." She grinned. "That was insane. I mean, who does math like that? My name's Olivia, by the way." She extended her hand, and Jaden shook it, unsure of what else to say. Olivia seemed genuinely friendly, but there was something about the way she spoke that made Jaden feel like she was sizing him up. "Don't let the others intimidate you," she said after a moment, her voice lower now. "Everyone's been through the same things, in different ways. We all got here because we're good at what we do." Jaden wasn't sure if she was talking to him or trying to convince herself. He wanted to respond, but just then, Ms. Ruiz walked to the front of the room, clapping her hands to grab everyone's attention. "All right, everyone, settle down," she said. "I'm glad you're all here today. I know the Northside Scholars Program might feel a little overwhelming at first, but I promise you, each and every one of you has earned your place here." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the room, locking eyes with each student for a moment. "I want you all to remember something," Ms. Ruiz continued. "This program isn't just about raw intelligence or test scores. It's about potential, the ability to take what you already know and push the boundaries of what's possible. You're not just here to learn from others, but to teach, challenge, and inspire one another." A chill ran down Jaden's spine. Was this some kind of speech meant to inspire them? Or was it a warning? He thought about his own potential. The potential that had gotten him here, despite the odds. The potential he still wasn't sure he wanted to embrace. He could feel the weight of the room pressing in on him, everyone's eyes on him, waiting for him to speak up, to offer something brilliant or insightful. The last thing he wanted to do was stand out more than he already had. But before he could retreat into his thoughts again, Ms. Ruiz began assigning tasks. "Okay," she said, "we're going to start with an exercise. I want each of you to pair up with someone at this table, and together, you'll work on a small project. It could be anything, a math problem, a coding challenge, a research topic. The goal is to see how well you can work with others, how you can blend your skills and knowledge to solve something." Jaden swallowed hard. Pairing up. He wasn't ready for this. As the students around him began talking and pairing off, Jaden felt the unease settle back in. His mind raced for an excuse to sit this one out, but it was already too late. The partners were being chosen, and before he could blink, Olivia had leaned over to him again. "Wanna team up?" she asked, her eyes bright. Jaden nodded, though he didn't feel like he had a choice. He wasn't sure if he should be relieved or even more stressed out. For the next few hours, Jaden and Olivia worked together on a small programming challenge, trying to build an algorithm to predict future trends in weather patterns based on a set of data points. Jaden wasn't sure if he was more surprised by how easy it was to fall into a rhythm with Olivia or how much he actually enjoyed the task. There was a moment where he caught himself, he was actually enjoying the process. "Hey, this is pretty cool," he admitted, his fingers moving across the keyboard quickly, his mind racing through the logic of the code. Olivia looked over at him, impressed. "You're not as bad at this as you said. I mean, you've really got a knack for this stuff." Jaden didn't reply immediately, but he couldn't stop the smile that tugged at his lips. For the first time in a while, someone wasn't looking at him like he was some kind of puzzle to be solved. Olivia just saw him as someone who could keep up. By the end of the session, they had finished the project ahead of schedule. Ms. Ruiz was walking around, checking in on everyone's progress, and when she stopped by their table, she gave them an approving nod. "Great work, Jaden. Olivia. You two make a good team," she said, then turned to address the group. "This is what I'm talking about. It's about collaboration. It's about finding your strengths and working together to create something meaningful." Jaden felt a rush of pride. He wasn't sure if it was because of the project they had finished, or because for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like an outsider. Later, when the meeting was winding down and everyone was packing up their things, Olivia waved at him. "Hey, you're not so bad, Jaden. I think we should work together more often." Jaden managed a smile. "Maybe. You're not so bad yourself." As they both left the room, Jaden realized something that he hadn't allowed himself to admit before: he wasn't just here to fit in. He was here to grow. And that meant learning to embrace the parts of him he had always been afraid to show. As Jaden walked out of the building and into the cool evening air, a thought lingered in the back of his mind. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Jaden had expected the Northside Scholars program to be intense, but he had no idea what kind of storm he was walking into. The first week had been nothing compared to what Ms. Ruiz had planned next. It was like she had been holding back, waiting for the right moment to push them to their limits. It was Tuesday morning when Jaden sat down for the second session, feeling a little more confident than the first time. He had worked with Olivia on a few other smaller projects since their first partnership, and every time, he felt himself getting better at the whole teamwork thing. He still wasn't entirely sure what he was doing here or if he deserved to be here, but one thing was certain: he was beginning to feel a strange sort of connection to the program, and maybe even to the people around him. As he entered the large conference room, Ms. Ruiz was already at the front, setting up a projector. The usual crowd of students was sitting at their tables, chatting with each other or tapping away on their laptops. Olivia waved him over to her usual spot, already in the middle of something on her screen. Jaden walked over, but before he could sit down, Ms. Ruiz interrupted, her voice filled with urgency. "Everyone, take a seat," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We have something important to cover today." Jaden's stomach churned. He had a feeling this wasn't going to be the laid-back session like before. Ms. Ruiz didn't waste any time. As soon as everyone was settled, she hit a button on the projector, and the screen behind her lit up with a set of complex equations and cryptic data. Jaden squinted. This was not your average high school assignment. The numbers on the screen seemed to blur together, a dizzying array of variables that only made sense if you knew what you were doing. And Jaden was starting to feel like he didn't know what he was doing at all. "This is a problem we're going to solve together," Ms. Ruiz said, her voice calm but stern. "It's a simulation of a real-world crisis. We'll be using data analysis, algorithm design, and a bit of creative thinking to figure out the solution. You'll need to work in teams. I'll be assigning each group a different challenge based on the data. There's no time to waste." Jaden felt a wave of panic wash over him. A crisis simulation? This wasn't just about impressing Ms. Ruiz anymore. This was about real-world problems that could actually make a difference. Ms. Ruiz glanced at the clock before continuing. "You have 2 hours to come up with your solution. You will present your work at the end, and each group will be judged not just on the technicality of their solution, but on their creativity and teamwork." The room grew quieter. Students started murmuring, some of them clearly nervous, others excited by the challenge. Jaden wasn't sure which camp he belonged to, but all he knew was that he couldn't afford to mess up. Not this time. Ms. Ruiz called out the pairs, and Jaden's heart skipped a beat when he heard the name of his new partner. "Jaden and Kyle," she announced. Jaden's stomach dropped. Kyle. Kyle was the guy everyone else seemed to be intimidated by, the quiet, super smart, overachiever who always had the answers before anyone even asked the questions. Kyle never spoke unless he had to, and when he did, it was always with that weirdly calm, almost condescending tone. Kyle looked over at Jaden with a raised eyebrow, as if to say, "Are you even capable of keeping up?" Jaden couldn't blame him for thinking that. Kyle had been in the program for a while Jaden had barely scraped by in his first few days. "Great," Jaden muttered under his breath as he walked over to the table where Kyle was already seated, his laptop open and his fingers hovering over the keyboard like he was ready to start typing before anyone even gave him the problem. Kyle didn't even look up as Jaden sat down. "We're analyzing a set of predictive data from environmental factors," he said, his voice flat. "Looks like it's going to be a simulation of urban sustainability. The data set is messy, but it's solvable if you know what you're doing." Jaden stared at the screen in front of him, his mind racing. He had no idea what he was looking at. The numbers seemed random. The variables were all over the place. The only thing that stood out was the word sustainability, something Jaden had always been interested in, but he'd never really considered how his talents could apply to it. Kyle clicked through the data points, and Jaden watched, silently. After a few moments, Kyle exhaled. "We're going to need to create an algorithm to sort through these variables and figure out what factors have the most impact on long-term sustainability. This isn't going to be quick, so we better get started." Jaden's fingers itched. There was something about the way Kyle was just diving into the work that made Jaden feel like he was standing on the edge of something huge. For a split second, his nerves faded, replaced by a strange sort of confidence. Maybe Kyle didn't know everything about Jaden. Maybe he hadn't realized yet that Jaden could do this. Jaden could figure this out. As the hours passed, Jaden fell into the flow of the problem-solving process. They worked together, analyzing the data, writing algorithms, and discussing the best way to present their solution. Kyle's methodical approach was helpful in many ways, but Jaden's creative insights began to push them further, taking the problem in a new direction. "What if we looked at it from a different angle?" Jaden asked at one point, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Instead of just focusing on the numbers, we could use machine learning to predict the long-term effects of different urban planning strategies based on the current trends in the data." Kyle paused, a flicker of curiosity passing over his face. He considered Jaden's suggestion, then nodded. "That's not a bad idea. We can run some simulations based on your approach. Let's see how far it gets us." They dove into the new strategy, and for the first time since they'd been paired up, Jaden could feel Kyle's respect building. It wasn't a look of admiration exactly, but there was something different in the way Kyle interacted with him now, like he was beginning to see that maybe Jaden wasn't just another kid with a viral video. As the 2-hour deadline approached, Jaden could feel the pressure mounting. He could see the other groups wrapping up their work, already preparing to present their findings. He and Kyle were still deep in coding, fine-tuning their algorithm, making sure their results were accurate and ready to present. Finally, Ms. Ruiz called for everyone to wrap up. "All right, time's up. I need each group to present their solution. Kyle and Jaden, you're up first." Jaden felt his heart race as he stood up, standing next to Kyle at the front of the room. He glanced at the data on the screen behind them, the results of their algorithm laid out for everyone to see. Kyle started speaking, his voice calm and controlled as he explained their approach. Jaden stayed quiet, letting Kyle handle the technical parts. But when it was time to explain the creative side, the machine learning model Jaden had suggested, Jaden stepped in. "We took a different approach by utilizing a predictive algorithm," Jaden began, his voice steady now. "Instead of just analyzing existing data, we ran simulations to project future sustainability based on urban planning strategies. What we found was that the most effective way to balance growth and sustainability is through a multi-tiered approach, combining both technological advancements and more organic, community-driven solutions." There was a pause, and for the first time since he'd started speaking, Jaden saw the room fall silent. The students and Ms. Ruiz were listening intently, their eyes focused on him. Jaden couldn't help but feel a little pride swelling in his chest. Maybe he really belonged here after all. When they finished their presentation, Ms. Ruiz gave them a thoughtful nod. "Well done," she said, "you two really worked well together." As the group presentations continued, Jaden felt a new confidence growing inside him. This was just the beginning. He wasn't going to let his fear hold him back. There was so much more to learn, but he was finally starting to realize something: he was capable of more than he had ever allowed himself to believe. The following week, Jaden felt the weight of his decision to join the Northside Scholars Program more than ever. Each day seemed to bring new challenges, more complicated assignments, and higher stakes. He'd barely managed to catch his breath from the last project before Ms. Ruiz threw them into another one. But it wasn't just the workload that had Jaden on edge, it was the increasing pressure to perform, to keep up with the other students, and to prove that he wasn't just the viral math kid who'd lucked into being here. It started on Monday morning when Ms. Ruiz announced the next assignment. "This week," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "we're going to be tackling real-world problems. And I mean problems that require creative solutions and collaboration. No one gets through this program alone, and I expect you all to work together, not just within your teams, but across teams as well." Jaden felt a pit form in his stomach. Real-world problems. That was a whole new level of pressure. This wasn't just theoretical stuff anymore, these were challenges that could actually make a difference. If he screwed this up, it wasn't just his grades at stake, it was his reputation, his future. They were split into new teams, and this time, Jaden wasn't paired with Olivia or Kyle. Instead, he was placed with Maya, a girl he'd only heard about in passing, known for her incredible ability to think on her feet. She was a quiet type, but when she spoke, her ideas cut through the room like a sharp knife. Jaden had heard the whispers: Maya was smart. Almost too smart. And that intimidated him. Maya didn't waste any time as they sat down together in the designated work area. "All right, we've got a pretty complex problem this time. We're tasked with creating a solution to address food insecurity in urban areas," she said, her tone efficient. "It's not just about finding a temporary fix, though. The solution needs to be sustainable and scalable. We have to consider everything, from access to resources to community involvement. How do you think we should start?" Jaden opened his mouth to respond but then hesitated. Food insecurity. That was a tough one. He had seen the effects of it around his own neighborhood, but he hadn't really thought about how to solve it. There was a lot of pressure riding on this, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized just how complex the issue really was. "Well," he started slowly, "I think the first thing we need to do is gather data about which communities are most affected, what resources are available, and how we can connect them better." He glanced over at Maya. "But that's just the start. We can't solve food insecurity by just handing out food. We need to figure out a way to make it sustainable." Maya nodded, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "Right. I agree. We need to make sure that whatever solution we come up with not only addresses the immediate need but also creates a long-term system. Maybe we could look into urban farming initiatives or food sharing programs. Something that involves the community." Jaden felt a surge of relief that Maya was already thinking along the same lines as him. They'd barely started, but for the first time since joining the program, Jaden felt like he was on the same page with his teammate. They spent the next few hours brainstorming ideas, mapping out potential solutions, and sifting through data on urban farming, food deserts, and community-driven food programs. But despite their progress, there was an undercurrent of pressure that Jaden couldn't shake. By the time the afternoon session ended, Jaden felt mentally drained. The problem was huge. The data was overwhelming, and as the days wore on, he started to feel the stress gnawing at him. Everyone around him was so much more experienced. Maya seemed like she had it all together, but Jaden couldn't help but compare himself to her. She was a natural leader, confident in her decisions. Jaden? He was just a kid trying to stay afloat in an ocean of expectations. At the end of the week, the presentations loomed large. All teams were expected to present their solutions to the entire group, including Ms. Ruiz. The thought of standing in front of everyone, explaining their idea, was making Jaden's stomach twist into knots. What if their solution wasn't good enough? What if they failed? On the day of their presentation, Jaden was up early, staring at the screens filled with data, graphs, and charts. Maya had already taken the lead on compiling everything, but Jaden couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he hadn't done enough. He had contributed ideas, sure, but Maya was the one who had really pushed the project forward. As they walked into the conference room, Jaden noticed that the other teams looked equally tense. Some were rehearsing their presentations, while others were sitting in quiet huddles, reviewing their notes. The pressure was suffocating. Jaden could barely breathe as he took a seat next to Maya. Ms. Ruiz entered the room, her presence commanding immediate attention. She glanced around the room, surveying each group with a calculating look. "Today is important," she said. "This is where I want to see how well you can present your solutions, how clearly you can articulate your ideas and the logic behind them. Remember, it's not just about the solution, it's about communication." Jaden swallowed hard. Communication. The word echoed in his mind. He hated public speaking. He hated having to explain himself, to lay bare his thoughts and ideas for everyone to scrutinize. But there was no escaping it now. The first few teams presented, each one showcasing their creative solutions to issues like climate change, mental health, and access to education. Each presentation seemed to raise the stakes. The bar kept getting higher. And with each passing presentation, Jaden felt more and more certain that their solution would fall short. Finally, it was their turn. Maya stood up and started speaking, her voice clear and steady. Jaden followed her lead, presenting their idea of urban farming initiatives combined with food-sharing networks. Maya spoke about the importance of community engagement, while Jaden discussed how data-driven solutions could optimize the distribution of food in urban areas. As the presentation wrapped up, Jaden felt a flood of relief wash over him. They had done it. Their solution was far from perfect, but it was something tangible. It wasn't just a set of ideas anymore, it was a plan. And they had pulled it together, despite all the doubts, the stress, and the pressure. Ms. Ruiz's expression was unreadable as she looked at the group. She wasn't one to offer praise easily, and that made Jaden nervous. After a long pause, Ms. Ruiz spoke. "Your solution is promising. But there's more work to be done. The next phase will involve taking this idea and making it scalable, testing it out in real-world environments, seeing how it functions in the field." Jaden exhaled, not sure if he should be relieved or terrified. There was still so much more to do. But for the first time, he realized something. He wasn't in this alone. Maya had his back, and together, they could make it work. As they packed up their things, Maya looked over at Jaden with a slight smile. "We did well. Don't let the pressure get to you. We're in this together, all right?" Jaden nodded, grateful for her words. Maybe the pressure would never completely go away, but as long as he had teammates like Maya, maybe he could handle it. Maybe, just maybe, he could start believing in himself. The following days felt like a blur. Jaden had barely recovered from the pressure of the presentation when Ms. Ruiz hit them with the next task. It was like she had an endless stream of assignments, each more complex than the last. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up. It wasn't just the work itself that was wearing him down, it was the constant feeling that he was out of his depth. Despite his success with Maya in the last presentation, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that he was constantly trying to catch up to the other students, who seemed like they belonged here far more than he did. That Wednesday morning, as Jaden entered the conference room, Ms. Ruiz had a new assignment waiting for them. She stood at the front, her arms crossed, watching them as they filed in. There was a certain intensity in her gaze today, something that made Jaden's stomach twist. "Good morning," she began, her voice low and serious. "Today, we're going to be working on something that will require you to push yourselves harder than you ever have before. This is not an assignment for the faint of heart. In fact, it will likely be one of the most difficult things you'll ever do in this program." Jaden felt a lump form in his throat. Difficult? He was already struggling to keep his head above water, and now she was telling them it was about to get worse. Ms. Ruiz clicked a button, and the screen behind her flashed to life, displaying a highly technical project involving artificial intelligence, AI. Jaden blinked in confusion. This wasn't the type of challenge he had been expecting. The text on the screen was a tangled mess of codes, formulas, and algorithms that meant absolutely nothing to him. As you can see, Ms. Ruiz continued, this is an AI-driven optimization problem. Your task is to design an AI system that can analyze data from multiple sources and find solutions for environmental sustainability. You will work in teams again, but this time, I'm mixing things up. Jaden's heart dropped. AI. He had no experience with artificial intelligence. Sure, he knew the basics of coding, but this was like asking him to solve a Rubik's Cube with his eyes closed. The room was silent as Ms. Ruiz clicked through the rest of the slides, explaining the details of the assignment. The problem involved processing massive datasets and using machine learning algorithms to predict long-term outcomes based on real-world data. She then announced the teams. Jaden was paired with Leah, a quiet, but brilliant student who had quickly become one of the top performers in the program. Leah was known for her deep understanding of technology and had been working on machine learning projects long before she even entered the program. Jaden didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Leah was brilliant, but she was also a perfectionist, and that wasn't always a good thing. He wasn't sure if he could keep up with her, and the thought of failing in front of her made his nerves flare up. Leah didn't waste time on pleasantries. As soon as they sat down together, she opened her laptop and began explaining the task in detail. So, the first step is to clean the data. We need to remove any irrelevant or inconsistent information. The next part is creating the models and testing them with real-world scenarios. It's all about finding patterns, predicting outcomes, and then optimizing the system for accuracy. This will require a lot of iterations. Jaden tried to follow, but the complexity of it all made his head spin. It was a far cry from the environmental sustainability problem they had worked on with Maya. This was next-level stuff. Right, Jaden said, trying to hide the unease in his voice. So, we're basically creating an AI system that can make predictions. Leah nodded. Exactly. We'll need to start by understanding how the data interacts, then use that to inform the machine learning model. It's going to take a lot of trial and error. Jaden wanted to speak up, but his mind was racing. How was he supposed to contribute to something so advanced? His experience was basic at best compared to Leah's. As the session wore on, Jaden tried to get a handle on the data they were working with, but it felt like everything he touched only got messier. The numbers on the screen seemed to mock him, their complexity far beyond anything he had learned in school. Leah, on the other hand, was in her element. She navigated the code like it was second nature, typing rapidly and making adjustments with ease. Jaden watched her work, feeling more and more inadequate with each passing minute. Leah, Jaden said after a long silence, I don't know if I'm getting this. I thought I understood coding, but this is way over my head. Leah didn't look up from her laptop, but she did pause long enough to give him a small smile. It's okay. You're not supposed to understand it all at once. The key here is to start small. Break down the problem into manageable pieces, and the rest will follow. Jaden nodded, trying to take in her words, but his doubts weren't so easily silenced. What if I can't keep up? The question kept echoing in his mind, each beat like a drum in his chest. He had to find a way to contribute, but the mountain of data in front of him seemed impossible to scale. The next few days were a blur of code and frustration. Despite his best efforts, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that he was falling behind. Every time Leah made progress, Jaden couldn't help but feel like he was dragging the team down. He tried to get involved by offering suggestions, but they always seemed to fall short. His attempts at cleaning the data were clumsy, and the models Leah created seemed to break down every time Jaden tried to test them. By Thursday afternoon, Jaden was barely keeping it together. He had spent hours poring over lines of code, only to find himself running in circles. His mind was exhausted, and his confidence was eroding. Leah, however, seemed unfazed. She was calm, focused, and determined, qualities Jayden admired but couldn't quite replicate. As she continued to refine their model, Jayden watched her work, feeling an increasing sense of frustration and self-doubt. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the deadline arrived. Jayden's palms were sweaty as he stared at their incomplete project. They had made progress, but it was nowhere near what he knew it needed to be. The AI model wasn't as efficient as it should have been, and their testing still hadn't yielded the kind of results they had hoped for. Ms. Ruiz stood at the front, as always, her gaze sweeping across the room. She had that stern expression on her face, the one that said she expected greatness. Jayden's heart pounded in his chest. When it was their turn, Leah took the lead in presenting their work. She explained their approach, the data they had used, and the progress they had made, but Jayden could see the disappointment in her eyes as she spoke. She had worked so hard, and now, despite her brilliance, their project still wasn't perfect. When they finished, Ms. Ruiz took a long moment before speaking. "Your solution is interesting, but it's not quite where I expected it to be," she said, her voice measured. "There are some gaps in the model that need to be addressed. You didn't test enough scenarios. You also need to refine your data cleaning process." Jayden felt his heart sink. He had known it wasn't perfect, but hearing it from Ms. Ruiz felt like a punch to the gut. Leah, however, seemed unfazed. "We can fix it," she said quickly, her voice steady. "We'll refine the model and retest it. We're not done yet." Jayden nodded, though his mind was swirling. "Maybe we can fix it, but what if it's still not enough?" As they packed up, Leah turned to Jayden with a thoughtful look. "You did your best. And we'll get it right next time. You've got more in you than you think. Don't let this defeat you," she said, her voice calm, but there was something in her tone that made Jayden believe her. Maybe they weren't done yet. Maybe there was a way forward, they just had to keep pushing. After the presentation, Jayden couldn't shake the feeling of failure that clung to him. Despite Leah's reassuring words, he couldn't help but feel like he had let her down. She had put so much effort into the project, and here he was, stumbling through it. His confidence, which had once been so unshakable, was now fractured. But he didn't have time to wallow in self-pity. There was more work to do, and the clock was ticking. Leah was determined to make things work. She wasn't the type to dwell on setbacks, and that was one of the things Jayden admired about her. She took their feedback from Ms. Ruiz in stride and immediately dove back into the project. She had a plan to address the gaps in their model. They needed more robust testing, better data cleaning, and more refined algorithms. And most importantly, they needed to focus on the scalability of their solution. Jayden, on the other hand, was still reeling from the harsh critique. The thought of making things right seemed like a daunting task. How could they fix this? They were so far behind, and there was so much left to do. But Leah wasn't going to let him hide behind his doubts. She pushed him, day after day, reminding him that they were in this together. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the conference room, something shifted. Jayden had been staring at his screen for what felt like hours, trying to clean the data and run tests. But every time he ran a new test, it seemed to return the same results, flawed, incomplete data that didn't fit the model. Frustration built in his chest. Why couldn't he get it right? Leah noticed his frustration and looked over at him. "Jayden, take a step back. You've been staring at this for too long. Let's look at it from a different angle." Jayden sighed and pushed back from the table, stretching his stiff arms. "I don't know, Leah. I've tried everything. I'm just not getting it. This whole thing is way over my head." Leah didn't respond immediately, but instead, she stood up and moved to his side of the table. She leaned over his screen, her eyes scanning the data for a moment before she spoke. You're looking at this the wrong way. What if we didn't focus on cleaning the data first? What if we created a more flexible algorithm that could adapt to the inconsistencies in the data instead of trying to force it into a perfect mold? Jaden blinked. He hadn't considered that. They had been so focused on cleaning the data to make it perfect that they hadn't considered what might happen if they just let the model handle the inconsistencies on its own. But could it really work? Leah continued, her voice steady. Think about it. AI models are designed to learn from mistakes, to adapt and improve over time. If we can make the system more adaptive, we might actually be able to use the inconsistencies to improve the model. Jaden's mind began to race. He wasn't entirely sure how this idea would work, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. They had been trying to force the data into something it wasn't, rather than letting the algorithm figure out how to process the imperfections. I think you're onto something, Jaden said, his voice gaining confidence. Instead of trying to scrub every little inconsistency, maybe we can adjust the model to embrace those inconsistencies. It's like teaching the AI to deal with the messiness, not avoid it. Leah smiled. Exactly. And if we can make it work, we'll have something that's not just accurate, but also resilient. Jaden felt a spark of excitement. He could see it now. This wasn't just a coding problem. It was a chance to create something innovative, something that could adapt to real-world challenges, much like the world they were trying to solve. And he had the tools to make it happen. The next few hours were a blur of rapid coding and brainstorming. Jaden felt like he was on fire, his mind firing on all cylinders. For the first time, he truly felt like he was contributing. The lines of code seemed to flow effortlessly, and as they made the changes to the algorithm, it began to adapt to the inconsistencies in the data. The model wasn't perfect, but it was starting to show promising results. Leah, too, seemed energized by the shift in their approach. She had always been methodical, but now she was excited to experiment with the changes. They worked well together. Leah's technical expertise and Jaden's creative problem-solving skills were a perfect complement. They weren't just solving a problem anymore, they were innovating, creating something new. By the time the sun set that evening, Jaden felt a sense of accomplishment that had eluded him for weeks. They had made significant progress. The model was far from perfect, but it was working in ways they hadn't expected. They had found a solution that not only handled the data more efficiently but also showed real potential for scalability. The next morning, Jaden couldn't wait to show Ms. Ruiz their progress. As they stood in front of the class, ready to present their updated AI model, Jaden felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. They had come so far in such a short amount of time. Would Ms. Ruiz see the value in their approach? Would their solution be enough to impress her? Leah started the presentation, explaining the technical aspects of their model and how they had shifted their approach to focus on adaptability rather than perfection. Jaden followed, speaking about how their new model could scale and be applied to real-world environmental sustainability problems. He felt a rush of confidence as he spoke, his voice steady and clear. For the first time in the program, he felt like he belonged. When they finished, there was a long pause. Ms. Ruiz studied their presentation, her expression unreadable. Jaden's heart raced. Had they done enough? Finally, Ms. Ruiz spoke, her voice thoughtful. This is a very innovative approach. It's not perfect, but I can see the potential. You've learned something valuable here, that sometimes, it's the imperfections that make a solution truly powerful. Jaden exhaled, a wave of relief washing over him. The weight that had been pressing on his chest for weeks finally lifted. They had done it. After the presentation, Leah turned to him with a smile. See? I told you we had it in us. Jaden smiled back, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. Yeah, we did. I couldn't have done it without you. Leah gave a small shrug. We did it together. That's what matters. And for the first time since joining the Northside Scholars Program, Jaden realized that he wasn't just there because of his genius IQ. He was there because he had the ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow. And with teammates like Leah, maybe, just maybe, he had found a place where he truly belonged. The day after their successful presentation, Jaden felt a shift in the air. He'd never experienced anything like it before, a sense of recognition that came with hard work finally paying off. The weight he'd been carrying for weeks seemed lighter now, and the doubt that had once consumed him was replaced by something stronger, confidence. As he walked through the campus with Leah by his side, he couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. The people he passed, the professors, even the other students, it was as if they were looking at him differently now. He wasn't just the quiet kid who barely spoke in class. He wasn't just the one they expected to fail. He had proven something, and for the first time, Jaden felt like he truly belonged. But it wasn't just the recognition that excited him. It was the sense of possibility that came with it. He could feel a new chapter opening in front of him, one where his potential wasn't limited by the expectations of others or his own self-doubt. There was so much more to explore, so much more he could do. Leah, who had been walking beside him, noticed the look on his face. She smiled, a glint of pride in her eyes. "You look like you're thinking about something big." Jaden grinned. "I am. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of what we can do. This project was only the beginning, right? There's so much more to learn, to explore, to experiment with." Leah nodded. "That's the spirit. I've always believed that the best breakthroughs come when you stop thinking about what's possible and start thinking about what's next." Jaden's mind raced with the possibilities. He had always been brilliant at solving problems, but now he understood that his true strength wasn't just in finding solutions, it was in creating new ways of thinking, new ways of approaching challenges. He realized that he didn't just want to follow the path others had paved. He wanted to forge his own. Later that afternoon, Ms. Ruiz gathered the class for another meeting. Jaden wasn't sure what to expect. After their recent success, he half expected her to give them a break, maybe even praise them for their hard work. But he should have known better. Ms. Ruiz wasn't one to rest on past achievements. She was always pushing them forward. As the class settled into their seats, Ms. Ruiz stood at the front of the room, a serious expression on her face. "You all did well on your last project. But we don't have time to rest. If anything, this is just the beginning. The real challenge begins now." Jaden felt his stomach tighten. This didn't sound like good news. "The next phase of your learning is about applying everything you've learned so far into real-world scenarios," Ms. Ruiz continued, her eyes scanning the room. "This will be your final project for the semester. You will need to develop a prototype that can be used in industry. And I'm not talking about some simple tool or app. I'm talking about something that can make a real impact." Jaden's pulse quickened. He felt the weight of her words. A real-world prototype? That was far more serious than anything they'd worked on before. This was a whole new level. Ms. Ruiz paced in front of the class, clearly energized by the challenge she was about to throw at them. "This project will push you further than you've ever been pushed before. But the reward? Well, let's just say that the best projects will be presented to potential investors and industry leaders. You'll be working with professionals who have the power to make your ideas a reality. But remember, there's no room for mediocrity. You will be expected to deliver nothing less than excellence." Jaden exchanged a glance with Leah. This was huge. It wasn't just about passing anymore. It was about making an impact. About stepping into a world where everything they had learned up until now would be tested, honed, and used for something that mattered. Leah's eyes lit up with excitement. "This is what we've been training for, Jaden. It's time to show the world what we can really do." Jaden nodded, his own excitement rising to meet hers. "Let's make it count." The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning, brainstorming, and late nights. Ms. Ruiz had assigned them to new teams, and Jaden was paired with Leah once again. This time, however, their project was more ambitious than anything they had done before. They were tasked with designing a smart city solution, a sustainable, AI-driven system that could help optimize resource management in a large metropolitan area. Jaden had always been fascinated by smart technology and its potential to improve the world, but the scale of this project was overwhelming. They weren't just designing a tool, they were creating a system that could change the way people lived, worked, and interacted with their environment. Leah was already diving deep into the technical aspects of the project, researching AI models, data analytics, and infrastructure systems that could support such a solution. Jaden, on the other hand, was focused on the creative aspects. He thought about how the system could be used in real life, how it could evolve with the needs of the city, and how to make it user-friendly for people at all levels. It wasn't just about technology, it was about how people would interact with it. They spent hours working together, bouncing ideas off each other, and refining their concepts. But as the days passed, Jaden started to feel the weight of the task ahead. The pressure was mounting, and the stakes were higher than ever before. This could be the chance to prove what he was capable of. But it wasn't just about proving himself. The more Jaden thought about it, the more he realized that this project had the potential to change the world. This was his chance to leave a mark. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Jaden felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The pieces of their project were coming together in a way that felt almost magical. They had taken a complex problem and broken it down into manageable components. The AI system was beginning to take shape, and the sustainability aspects of the project were starting to look promising. But just as he was about to take a break, Leah turned to him with a serious look on her face. "Jaden, I've been thinking." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "I think we need to take a risk," she said, her voice steady. "We're playing it safe with the way we've structured the system. But what if we push the boundaries? What if we create something truly innovative, something that doesn't just optimize resources, but also anticipates future needs?" Jaden's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't considered that. Anticipating future needs, it was bold, risky, and maybe even a little insane. But if they pulled it off? He met Leah's eyes and saw the same fire he felt inside. "Let's do it," he said, his voice filled with newfound determination. "Let's show them what we're really capable of." The next few days were filled with even more intense work. They refined their AI algorithms, focused on predicting resource consumption patterns, and developed a system that could adapt in real time to changes in the city's needs. It was cutting-edge, ambitious, and everything they had hoped for. As the final presentation day approached, Jaden knew that this was more than just a project. This was their chance to set a new standard, to show that they could create something that wasn't just possible, but revolutionary. As the weeks flew by, Jaden and Leah found themselves working in overdrive. The pressure of the final project was unlike anything they had ever experienced before. The weight of their ambitions was heavy, but neither of them was willing to back down. They were on the verge of creating something that could change everything, and they wouldn't let anything stand in their way. The countdown to the final presentation was rapidly approaching, and the room they had rented for their group sessions was starting to feel more like a second home than just a place to work. Day and night, Jaden and Leah hammered away at their project, fine-tuning algorithms, tweaking the design, and testing every element of their smart city solution. Jaden had never felt so alive. The challenge was immense, but so was the potential for innovation. Every breakthrough, no matter how small, made him more determined. He knew the world wasn't just waiting for a solution to the problems they were tackling, it was desperately in need of one. If they could pull this off, they'd be at the forefront of something huge. But with each passing day, the stakes felt higher. They had taken a huge risk by making their system so adaptive, so able to anticipate future needs. There were moments of doubt when they would run simulations, only to see glitches, data inconsistencies, or unexpected results. The reality of their ambitious vision started to set in. Would it all fall apart in the final hours? Leah, ever the optimist, kept pushing forward. "We're getting there, Jaden. Look at the data, the system is improving. Every mistake is just another opportunity to learn. Jaden nodded but couldn't shake the fear that lingered at the back of his mind. Every time they ran a simulation, he couldn't help but think, what if it's not enough? What if their system couldn't handle the real-world data at the scale they were hoping for? But Leah's belief in their project was unshakable. She would point out the smallest improvements, a new variable they had anticipated, an efficiency they had improved. And every time, Jaden found himself encouraged, inspired by her unwavering confidence. Maybe they could make this work. Then, just 3 days before the final presentation, disaster struck. Jaden was running a final simulation to check how the system would handle a sudden influx of data, a common scenario for any real-world application. But as the simulation ran, the entire system crashed. The screen froze. Then, it blinked out of existence entirely. Jaden's heart dropped. He stared at the blank screen, hoping it would come back to life. It didn't. No, he muttered under his breath. No, no, no. Leah rushed over to him, her face etched with concern. What happened? I don't know, Jaden said, his voice tight. I ran the simulation and the system just shut down. Leah leaned over his shoulder, studying the error messages flashing across the screen. We've been testing this for weeks, Jaden. It shouldn't be happening now. But Jaden was already thinking ahead. The clock was ticking, and they couldn't afford to lose any more time. He began checking through their code, piece by piece, trying to find the error. It took him a few minutes to narrow it down to a critical vulnerability in their predictive model. The model wasn't handling high-pressure data spikes correctly, and the system was overloading when trying to process the information. It's the predictive function, Jaden said, frustration creeping into his voice. We built it to predict and adjust in real time, but we didn't account for the data overload. It's crashing when it tries to process too much. Leah took a deep breath. All right, we can fix this. We've faced setbacks before, Jaden. We just need to rework the predictive function, adjust it for higher volumes, and test it again. We still have time. But Jaden wasn't so sure. This wasn't a small tweak. This was a core flaw in their system, one that would take hours, if not days, to fix. And with just 3 days until the final presentation, time was something they didn't have. Jaden and Leah worked non-stop through the night, refactoring the code and rebuilding the system to handle higher data volumes. Jaden was exhausted, his eyes stinging from hours of staring at the screen, but he pushed through. Failure wasn't an option. Not now, not when they were so close to their goal. Leah kept the morale up, suggesting small breaks, reminding Jaden of how far they had come, and keeping their focus sharp. They were a team, and together, they could overcome anything. By dawn, Jaden had finally fixed the issue. They ran the simulation again, and this time, the system worked flawlessly. The predictive function was handling the data spikes as expected, and the model was back on track. Jaden leaned back in his chair, letting out a deep breath. His body ached from the marathon coding session, but the relief was immense. They had done it. Leah stood up, stretching her arms and smiling. I knew we could do it. We just needed to trust the process. Jaden smiled back, exhaustion still heavy on his face. I was starting to doubt it there for a second. But I'm glad you kept me focused. We're really going to pull this off. Leah grinned. We're not done yet. We still have a presentation to nail. The day of the final presentation arrived, and Jaden felt a rush of adrenaline. He and Leah arrived early, making final adjustments to their prototype. As they set up their demo, they could feel the tension in the air. Other teams were preparing, too, but this felt different. The competition was fierce, but Jaden and Leah were no longer worried about winning, they just wanted to prove that they could deliver. When the time came, they stood in front of the panel of industry experts, investors, and professors. The room was packed with some of the most influential people in the tech world, and Jaden's nerves kicked in. He had never been in front of such an important audience before, but this was his moment. This was what they had worked for. Leah spoke first, confidently explaining the details of their smart city solution. Jayden followed, demonstrating the adaptive AI model and how it could handle a real-world influx of data. They showed how their system could manage resources, anticipate needs, and evolve with the city it served. As they spoke, Jayden felt the weight of the room. But instead of freezing, he found himself thriving. This was his time. He had done the work. He understood the system inside and out. He wasn't just speaking about an idea, he was speaking about something real, something that could change the world. By the end of the presentation, the panel was quiet. The room seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, Jayden's heart raced. Had they made enough of an impact? Had they done it? Finally, one of the investors spoke. This is impressive. The scalability of this system, the adaptability, you've built something that could revolutionize the way we manage urban environments. I'm very interested in seeing this further developed. Jayden let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Leah smiled beside him, and Jayden realized, they had done it. They had taken a huge risk, faced enormous challenges, and come out victorious. But this was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following the final presentation were a blur for Jayden. The adrenaline that had propelled him and Leah through weeks of late nights and tireless work had finally begun to fade, but the sense of accomplishment and anticipation remained. They had made it. Not just through the project, but through the kind of challenge that most students never got to face, the kind that could change everything. The email from Ms. Ruiz, sent late the night of the presentation, was more than just a congratulatory note. It was a gatekeeper to what was next. Dear Jayden and Leah, I wanted to take a moment to tell you both how impressed I am by the work you presented. You've not only demonstrated technical skill but also an ability to think beyond the present, to envision how your solution can impact the future. I've shared your project with several colleagues in the industry, and there has already been interest from investors and urban development firms. Expect to hear from them shortly. The next step is yours. I suggest you take this opportunity to truly explore where your work can lead. You've only scratched the surface. Best regards. Ms. Ruiz. Jayden stared at the email for a long moment. His mind raced. They had done it. Their work was good enough to get noticed. The kind of attention he'd always dreamed about, but never thought he'd receive. What does it say? Leah asked, glancing over his shoulder as they sat in the quiet of their dorm room. Jayden looked up at her, a grin spreading across his face. It's official. We've made an impression. Ms. Ruiz shared our project with investors and companies, and now there's real interest. Leah's eyes widened with excitement. Wait. Are you saying, we could actually get funding? For real? Jayden nodded slowly, still trying to process what it all meant. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Leah jumped up, her excitement palpable. This is it, Jayden. This could change everything for us. We could take this project to the next level, build it, make it real, make it something that people use every day. But Jayden's mind was already racing ahead. They could get funding. They could take this further than any college project had ever gone. But with that came responsibility. And fear. What's next for us? Jayden asked, his voice barely above a whisper, more to himself than to Leah. Leah smiled at him, understanding exactly what he meant. The world is wide open now. And it's all ours for the taking. 2 days later, they received their first call from a venture capitalist firm based in New York. Jayden's hands shook as he answered the call, and Leah, sitting beside him, could barely contain her excitement. Hello, Jayden, the voice on the other end said. It was a deep, smooth voice, one that carried authority. This is Eric Grant from Horizon Ventures. I'm calling in regards to your project, the Smart City solution you presented to Ms. Ruiz. We've had a chance to review the details, and we'd like to discuss potential investment opportunities with you. Jaden's heart pounded in his chest. This was real. They were on the brink of something big. I'm listening, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. We believe your project is highly innovative, Eric continued. Our firm specializes in funding groundbreaking tech that can change industries, and we think you have the potential to make a real difference in urban development. We'd like to set up a meeting with you and Leah in person. What's your schedule like next week? Jaden looked over at Leah, who was practically jumping out of her seat with anticipation. He could feel the weight of this opportunity. It could mean everything. We can make it work. When do you want to meet? Eric suggested a time for next week, and they hung up the phone. As soon as the call ended, Leah couldn't contain her excitement any longer. Oh my God, Jaden. We just got a meeting with Horizon Ventures. This is huge. Do you know what this means? Jaden's heart was still racing, but he forced himself to slow down. It means we've made it, Leah. But it also means we have to step up our game. This is not just about us anymore. This is real. Leah nodded, her face serious for the first time in a long while. We have to show them we're not just students with an idea. We have to show them we're ready to take this to the next level. Jaden agreed. He knew they had to prepare for this meeting like nothing else before. The pressure was higher than ever, but he couldn't help feeling a surge of excitement. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to prove that he wasn't just another college student with a big idea. He was the person who could change the world. The next few days were a blur of meetings, presentations, and late-night strategy sessions. Jaden and Leah worked together to refine their pitch, rehearsing it over and over again. They focused on every detail, from the technical aspects of their smart city solution to the long-term vision they had for its impact on urban life. They worked to ensure that their presentation would convey not just their expertise, but their passion. It was no longer just about the technology. It was about why this project mattered, why it was needed, and how it could change the way cities were built, how people lived, and how the world approached sustainability. The day of the meeting, Jaden was a bundle of nerves and excitement. As he and Leah walked into the sleek, modern office of Horizon Ventures, he couldn't help but feel like they were stepping into a new world. The offices were pristine, the walls lined with cutting-edge technology, and the vibe was both professional and high-energy. Eric Grant greeted them warmly, and they were ushered into a large conference room. A team of investors sat around a polished table, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Jaden took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves, while Leah gave him an encouraging smile. They began their pitch, presenting their refined prototype and highlighting the unique aspects of their smart city solution. Jaden spoke with a confidence he hadn't known he had, explaining the predictive features, the real-time adaptability, and the sustainability aspects of their design. Leah chimed in with the technical details, walking them through the scalability of their AI models and the ways their solution could integrate with existing infrastructure. As they reached the end of their presentation, Eric leaned back in his chair, studying them intently. The room fell silent, and Jaden's heart skipped a beat. Had they convinced them? Was this enough? Finally, Eric spoke, his voice calm but decisive. This is exactly the kind of disruptive technology we look for, he said. We believe this has real potential. We'd like to move forward with funding and partnership discussions. You've earned it. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. Leah's eyes sparkled with disbelief and excitement. They had done it. They had taken their idea from the drawing board to reality. This wasn't just a dream anymore. This was their future. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to discuss the next steps, but for Jaden and Leah, the significance of what had just happened couldn't be understated. This was it. They had taken the first step toward building something that could change the world. As they left the meeting, Leah turned to Jaden, a wide grin on her face. We're not just students anymore, are we? Jaden smiled back, feeling the weight of everything they had accomplished and everything still to come. No, Leah. We're not just students anymore. We're entrepreneurs. The days following their meeting with Horizon Ventures felt like a whirlwind. Jaden and Leah were no longer students, they were entrepreneurs. The reality of what they had achieved began to settle in as they navigated the world of venture capital, business plans, and growth strategies. They were no longer just trying to make it through the semester. They were building something that could change the world. It had been a week since Horizon Ventures agreed to move forward with funding, and Jaden was still reeling from the enormity of it all. The paperwork had been signed, the contracts finalized. Horizon Ventures wasn't just investing in their technology, they were giving Jaden and Leah the resources they needed to scale their smart city solution and take it to the next level. The next step was clear: turn their prototype into a full-fledged business. Jaden sat in their small office at the local startup incubator, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. His laptop was open to a blank document, and a cursor blinked expectantly at him. It was time to write the business plan. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. The business plan wasn't just a formality. This was the roadmap for their company, the blueprint that would guide them through the early stages of growth and help them secure future investments. Every decision they made in the next few weeks would shape the future of their company. Leah, on the other hand, was already hard at work, jotting down ideas on a whiteboard in their shared workspace. Her mind was buzzing with ideas for scaling the technology, improving the user interface, and integrating additional features that would make their smart city solution even more robust. She had always been the more outwardly optimistic of the two, but Jaden could tell she was feeling the weight of the challenge too. "We're really doing this, huh?" Jaden asked, looking up at Leah, who was now engrossed in sketching out designs. Leah looked over at him, her eyes bright. "Absolutely. This is what we've been working toward. This is the real deal." Jaden let out a breath, feeling both nervous and excited. "I know, but it's a lot to handle. We have to find the right team, raise more funding, make sure the tech scales. It's not just about the idea anymore, Leah. It's about making this thing work in the real world." Leah smiled and walked over to his desk, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And we will. We have the vision, we have the investors, and we have each other. That's more than enough." Jaden nodded, grateful for her confidence. Together, they had always been able to push through. But now, the stakes were higher. They weren't just trying to prove their potential, they had to deliver. As the weeks passed, the pace of their lives quickened. They secured an office space, hired a small team, and began the process of turning their prototype into a scalable product. Jaden found himself in meetings with engineers, designers, and project managers, explaining their vision while trying to keep the team focused and motivated. It was a huge shift from the college setting, and Jaden quickly learned that running a company required more than just technical know-how. It took leadership, communication, and the ability to make decisions that impacted not just the product, but the people who worked for them. Leah took on the role of overseeing the tech team, ensuring that the developers were aligned with their goals and that the features they were building matched their long-term vision. She was still as passionate as ever, but Jaden could see the stress beginning to show. There were so many moving parts now, and it felt like they were constantly putting out fires. "I feel like we're juggling 100 things at once," Leah said one evening, as they sat in their new office, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and coffee cups. "It's all moving so fast, and it's hard to keep up with everything." Jaden understood exactly how she felt. He was constantly torn between strategic meetings with investors and technical discussions with their team. The pressure to grow the business, meet deadlines, and ensure that their product was always improving was immense. And the pressure was only increasing as they moved closer to their first big launch. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of clarity. They had the opportunity to do something extraordinary. They had already changed the trajectory of their lives. But now, They had the chance to change the future of cities and urban living itself. The thought of that kept him going. One morning, as Jaden sat at his desk, reviewing a market analysis report, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Ms. Ruiz. "Good morning, Jaden. I hope all is well. I wanted to give you a heads up that I've been speaking with a few of my colleagues at Tech Innovate, and they're very interested in your project. I've arranged for a meeting next week. You should be hearing from them soon. They could provide additional funding and strategic partnerships. This could be another big step for your company." Jaden's pulse quickened. Tech Innovate. The name alone was enough to make his stomach flutter. They were a well-known tech incubator, one of the biggest in the country, and a partnership with them could take their company to new heights. But it also meant more competition, more pressure, and more expectations. "Leah," Jaden called out, standing up and walking over to her desk. "You're not going to believe this." Leah looked up from her screen, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. "What's up?" Jaden showed her the text. "Ms. Ruiz just arranged a meeting with Tech Innovate. They're interested in what we're doing, and they could offer us more funding and strategic support." Leah's face lit up. "That's huge, Jaden. Tech Innovate could be the game changer we need. But we need to be ready. If they're going to take us seriously, we have to show them we're more than just a small startup." Jaden nodded. "Exactly. We need to bring our A game." The following days were a blur of preparation. They worked tirelessly to refine their pitch, focusing on how their technology could not only benefit individual cities but how it could transform the entire landscape of urban development. They needed to present themselves as not just a technology company, but a visionary company that had the potential to reshape the future. As the meeting with Tech Innovate drew closer, Jaden found himself both excited and nervous. This was the next big leap for them. But with it came the pressure of making sure they didn't just meet expectations, they had to exceed them. The day of the meeting, Jaden and Leah walked into the sleek office of Tech Innovate, their hearts racing. The room was filled with influential figures from the tech world, all of whom would be watching closely as they presented their idea. But this time, Jaden wasn't just speaking as a student. He was speaking as an entrepreneur, and he was ready to prove that they belonged at the table. The morning of their meeting with Tech Innovate had arrived, and the tension was palpable. Jaden stood in front of the large glass windows of their office, looking out at the skyline of the city that seemed to pulse with opportunity. His hands were clammy, but his resolve was stronger than ever. This meeting wasn't just another opportunity. It was a turning point, the moment where they would either secure the future of their company or face a roadblock that could change everything. Leah walked up beside him, her usual excitement tempered with a quiet seriousness. "You ready for this?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of excitement. Jaden turned to face her, the weight of the day sinking in. "I'm ready. But I can't help feeling like this is the make or break moment for us." Leah smiled, her confidence unwavering. "We've been preparing for this moment since we first came up with the idea. It's just another step forward, Jaden. We've got this." Jaden nodded, grateful for her unwavering belief in their project. It had been her optimism that had kept him going through the tough times, and now, as they faced the biggest challenge yet, it felt like they were more than ready to take it on. The meeting was set to take place in the heart of downtown at the Tech Innovate headquarters, a modern, sleek building filled with the kind of energy that only tech companies could generate. The lobby buzzed with activity as Jaden and Leah entered, taking in the futuristic decor and the eager faces of the entrepreneurs who had come to pitch their ideas. They felt like small fish in a big pond, but as they checked in at the reception desk, Jaden reminded himself, they had something real to offer. They were escorted to a large conference room on the top floor, where a long, polished table stretched across the center. Around it sat several venture capitalists, tech specialists, and corporate partners, all of whom had been carefully chosen by Tech Innovate for their potential to elevate groundbreaking ideas. Jaden couldn't help but feel a surge of nerves as he walked in, but as soon as they sat down, he focused on the mission at hand, to convince them that their smart city solution wasn't just a good idea, but the solution to some of the most pressing urban issues in the world. Eric Grant from Horizon Ventures was already seated at the table, and he gave them a friendly nod as they settled in. His presence provided a sense of familiarity, a bridge between their past and their future. After some brief introductions, the presentation began. Jaden and Leah had spent weeks rehearsing, refining their pitch, and fine-tuning their vision. They knew the stakes were high. This was no longer about proving themselves to Ms. Ruiz or even to their initial investors. This was about showing TechInnovate that they had the potential to transform cities, to create something that would be adopted by municipalities worldwide. Jaden kicked off the presentation, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Thank you for having us today. We're here to show you how our smart city solution is more than just a piece of technology. It's the future of urban living. Leah picked up where Jaden left off, diving into the technical aspects of their design. She explained the core components of their solution: predictive algorithms that could adjust traffic flow in real time, smart energy grids that would optimize the use of resources, and sustainability models that could reduce a city's carbon footprint. The integration of AI and IoT in urban systems has the potential to make cities not just smarter, but more sustainable, Leah continued. Our solution doesn't just react to problems, it anticipates them. It can help cities make data-driven decisions that will shape the future of urban living. Jaden could see the TechInnovate team nodding along, intrigued by what they were hearing. But there was still a question in the back of his mind: would they believe in them? The presentation moved forward, and as they reached the final segment, Jaden could feel his heart pounding. It was time to share their vision for the future. This wasn't just about technology. It was about impact. This project has the potential to change the way cities operate, Jaden said, his voice more passionate now. Imagine a world where cities can solve issues like traffic congestion, waste management, and energy inefficiency in real time. Imagine cities that are not only livable but sustainable and responsive to the needs of their citizens. We believe this is the future of urban development, and we're ready to lead the charge. There was a moment of silence in the room as the investors and partners exchanged glances. Jaden's stomach twisted. Had he said too much? Was this too bold, even for TechInnovate? But then, Eric Grant spoke up, his voice calm and thoughtful. Jaden, Leah, this is an impressive vision. You've done something most startups only dream of: you've combined innovative tech with a clear societal need. But as you know, with great potential comes great responsibility. Jaden's pulse quickened. Of course. We're fully aware of the challenges ahead. This is about execution as much as it is about the idea. We've spent the last year perfecting the technology, and now it's about making sure we can scale it and make it work on a large scale. Eric nodded. I appreciate that honesty. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of an idea, but you've shown that you understand the complexities of bringing this to life. Then, the head of the team, Sophia Carter, spoke up. She was known for her strategic acumen and her sharp ability to assess risk. What I want to know, Jaden, is what's your plan for the next 6 months? How will you go from prototype to product, and what kind of funding do you need to make that leap? Jaden leaned forward, his mind racing. This was the question he'd been preparing for. We've already established the technical feasibility. Our next step is to build a stronger team, hiring key personnel who can help us with development and scaling. We need additional funding to support the expansion of our operations, integrate with local governments, and refine our data systems. We're aiming to launch a pilot in one city by the end of the year. Sophia raised an eyebrow. And how do you plan to ensure that cities will adopt your solution? It's one thing to build something great, it's another to convince municipalities to trust you with their infrastructure. Jaden took a deep breath. This was the tough part. Convincing governments to invest in new technology could be a daunting task. We're already in discussions with several municipalities, and our solution has been well received. But beyond the technology, we're offering a partnership, not just a product. We want to work alongside these cities, understand their challenges, and provide them with a customized solution. It's not about pushing technology on them, it's about solving real-world problems. Sophia nodded slowly, impressed by his answer. All right. You've got our attention. The room was quiet for a moment as the investors took it all in. Then, Eric spoke again. We're prepared to move forward with an initial round of funding. You've got something special here, and we're interested in being a part of it. But there's one condition: we want to be involved in the decision-making process, especially when it comes to partnerships and scaling. We need to make sure that the growth of this company is managed carefully. Jaden's heart raced with excitement. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. We can work with that, Jaden said, his voice steady despite the excitement bubbling up inside him. As they left the meeting room, Jaden and Leah shared a look that spoke volumes. They had done it. They had secured the next phase of funding in a partnership with TechInnovate. But as they stood in the elevator, waiting for the doors to close, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with new challenges, decisions, and unexpected obstacles. But one thing was certain: they were no longer students hoping for a chance. They were entrepreneurs, with a real shot at changing the future. The first few weeks after securing the partnership with TechInnovate felt like a blur. Jaden and Leah were pulled in every direction, from strategic planning meetings to discussions about expanding their team and refining their product. They had barely settled into their new roles when the first real challenge emerged, one they hadn't anticipated but couldn't afford to ignore. It started with a phone call early on a Tuesday morning. Jaden was in the middle of drafting an email to investors when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was from Eric Grant at Horizon Ventures. Good morning, Jaden. We need to discuss something urgent. Can you make time for a call today? It's about the TechInnovate deal. Jaden's heart skipped a beat. Urgent. That could mean anything. He quickly dialed Eric's number, his mind racing with possible scenarios. Hey, Eric. What's going on? Jaden, I need to be upfront with you, Eric's voice sounded grave. We've just received some troubling news. There's been a delay with the integration of your technology into the municipal systems. Some key stakeholders are raising concerns about scalability, and it's starting to affect the confidence around your project. I'm hearing rumors that some of the cities you're targeting might be pulling back. Jaden felt a chill run down his spine. Wait, what? I thought everything was on track. It's complicated. They were expecting your tech to integrate smoothly with existing infrastructure, and right now, it's not performing as well as promised. They've been putting pressure on TechInnovate to find answers, and now TechInnovate is concerned about your readiness. They're hesitant to move forward unless you can resolve these concerns quickly. Jaden felt his pulse quicken. The last thing they needed was for their investors to lose confidence at this critical stage. Eric, we're working on it. The integration is more complex than we anticipated, but we have a team tackling the issues right now. Please, give me some time to resolve this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Eric spoke. I understand, but the clock is ticking. TechInnovate has committed a lot of resources to you too, and they won't wait forever. You need to come up with a solution, or they'll pull out. I'm just giving you the heads up. You've got a week. Jaden hung up, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. Leah had been working tirelessly with their engineers, but it was clear that the issues with scalability were bigger than they'd realized. They had only a week to fix everything or risk losing the biggest opportunity they'd ever had. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Jaden and Leah convened daily with their tech team, strategizing, debugging, and testing their system's capacity to integrate with real-world urban infrastructure. They were up late most nights, dissecting lines of code, running simulations, and discussing potential solutions to improve the efficiency of their algorithms. Despite the pressure, Jaden could feel a growing sense of doubt inside him. The tech was solid, but could they really make it work in time? The weeks of planning, the meetings with investors, the promises of changing the future, it was all on the line now, and the reality was starting to sink in. They were facing a real test of their strength. On the fourth day of their intensive troubleshooting, Leah came into Jaden's office, her expression serious. She sat down across from him, her arms crossed. "Jaden, we need to talk," she said, her tone more intense than usual. "The integration issues aren't getting any better. The system's performance drops when we run large-scale simulations. We need more resources to get this right. I'm not sure we can make the deadline." Jaden felt the weight of her words. He had been trying to stay optimistic, but now even he couldn't ignore the reality. They were in a race against time, and they were losing. "I know," he said quietly, rubbing his temples. "But we can't afford to fail. If TechInnovate pulls out, we lose everything. The funding, the partnerships, the momentum. All of it." Leah looked at him, her eyes narrowed. "I get it. But we're already pushing our team to the limit. We need more support, more expertise. And we need to have honest conversations with TechInnovate. We can't keep pretending that everything is perfect." Jaden took a deep breath. He hated admitting they might need more help, but she was right. The truth was, their current team wasn't equipped to handle the scaling issues they were facing. And if they didn't act fast, they could lose more than just their deal with TechInnovate, they could lose the whole business. "Okay," Jaden said. "Let's reach out to the team at TechInnovate. We need to ask for their help, not just for more time, but for additional resources. We can't fix this on our own." That afternoon, Jaden called Sophia Carter at TechInnovate to explain the situation. He was honest and direct, laying out the challenges they were facing without sugarcoating anything. "Sophia," he began, "we've hit a few roadblocks with the integration of our tech into the city systems. It's performing well in small-scale tests, but when we try to scale it up, the results are inconsistent. We need more resources, and more time, to get this right." Sophia listened intently before responding. "I understand. You've always been transparent with us, Jaden, and I appreciate that. But I need you to understand that we're under pressure too. We've already made some big promises to stakeholders, and they're asking for results." Jaden swallowed hard. The pressure was building from all sides, but he couldn't back down. "I get that. But we're doing everything we can. If you could provide us with additional engineering support or maybe help us find the right experts to fix the problem, we'll be able to meet the deadline. I just need a little more help." There was a long silence, and for a moment, Jaden wondered if he had overstepped. Finally, Sophia spoke. "I'll see what I can do. We'll bring in a few specialists and give you a bit more time to resolve the issue. But this needs to be your priority. I'm giving you a short extension, 2 more weeks. After that, we need results." Jaden's heart raced with relief. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. He thanked Sophia and hung up the phone, feeling a surge of hope for the first time in days. With the additional resources from TechInnovate, Jaden, Leah, and the team worked around the clock to resolve the integration issues. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, frustrations, and sleepless nights. But with the new experts on board, they finally began to see improvements. The system started to scale more smoothly, and after several intense days of testing, they were able to fix the performance issues. As they ran the final round of tests, Leah turned to Jaden, her eyes tired but triumphant. "I think we did it. The system's stable now." Jaden smiled, the weight lifting from his shoulders. "We did it. We've got 2 weeks to perfect it, but this is the breakthrough we needed." As they celebrated the small victory, Jaden realized that this challenge had shown him something important: they were stronger than they thought. They had faced failure, pressure, and doubt, but they had pushed through. Together, they were capable of anything. The next 2 weeks were nothing short of intense. Jaden and Leah had pushed their team to the brink, working day and night, burning the candle at both ends. The 2-week extension they'd received from Tech Innovate wasn't just a lifeline, it was their last shot. If they didn't show significant progress and prove that their technology could work seamlessly on a large scale, all their efforts could be in vain. The team had rallied together, but the pressure was immense. Every meeting felt like a countdown, every test carried the weight of the future. Jayden found himself staring at his laptop long after hours, eyes bloodshot, running algorithm after algorithm, hoping for the perfect outcome. Leah, too, had been working non-stop, testing the system's integration and ensuring that every component functioned as expected. One evening, after another round of unsuccessful tests, Jayden sat alone in the conference room, his hands running through his hair. The weight of the situation was finally catching up with him. What if it wasn't enough? What if their dream was slipping through their fingers, just as they were on the brink of success? As the door creaked open, Leah stepped into the room, her face drawn but determined. "Jayden," she said softly, walking over to him. "You need to take a break. You've been working non-stop for days. I know you want this to work, but we're not going to get anywhere if you're burnt out." Jayden looked up at her, his eyes tired but resolute. "I know. But if we don't get this right, we lose everything. Our vision, our investors, the team, all of it. I can't afford to stop now." Leah sighed, sitting down across from him. "I get it. But pushing yourself like this won't help anyone. We're in this together, Jayden. It's not just about you carrying the weight alone. We have a team. We have resources. We can do this, but we need to be smart." Jayden took a deep breath, trying to center himself. Leah was right. He couldn't carry the burden on his own, no matter how much he wanted to. They had always worked as a team, and it was time to lean on that partnership again. "Okay," he said, finally giving in. "Let's take a step back. What's the plan?" Leah smiled, her usual spark returning. "The plan is to focus on the basics. We know what needs to be done, but we've been so focused on scaling that we've lost sight of some of the finer details. We need to ensure that the foundation is solid before we move forward." Jayden nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He had been so caught up in the larger picture that he had forgotten about the small but critical pieces. They had to go back to basics, recheck every detail, and make sure that each component was performing at its best. The next morning, the team gathered in the conference room for a meeting. Jayden and Leah stood in front of the whiteboard, outlining their revised approach. There was a renewed sense of purpose in the room. Everyone knew that this was their final push, and there was no room for failure. "We've got one shot left," Jayden said, addressing the team. "We've got 2 weeks, but that's no excuse for rushing. We need to fix the last remaining issues with the system's scalability. That means we have to go back, check every line of code, revalidate our data models, and ensure that everything works flawlessly before we move forward. No more shortcuts." Leah added, "We'll divide into teams. Some of us will work on code optimization, while others will focus on improving the system's communication protocols. We need to test every edge case. If we miss one, it could mean the difference between success and failure." The team nodded in agreement, each person aware of the task at hand. For the first time in days, Jayden felt hopeful. They weren't just scrambling to fix things, they had a clear strategy. They were taking control. As the week progressed, the improvements were tangible. The system began running smoother in larger simulations. They managed to identify several key issues, a few outdated protocols, some suboptimal algorithms, and minor bugs that were affecting performance under stress. These weren't major problems, but they were the types of issues that could snowball if left unchecked. Jayden and Leah worked closely with the tech team, leading by example. Jayden dove deep into the coding process, working alongside their lead developer, Sarah, to rewrite certain functions. Leah tackled the algorithmic optimization, ensuring that the predictive models were accurately reflecting the real-world data. By the end of the week, they had made substantial progress. The system was finally scaling as it was supposed to, and the team was confident that the issues were resolved. But as the final day before their Techinnovate check-in arrived, Jaden felt the nerves return. It wasn't over yet. They still had one final hurdle to clear, the presentation. They had to convince Techinnovate, once again, that their solution was viable and ready to be deployed. They needed to sell the vision they had created, even as they were still working out the final technical tweaks. The morning of the presentation arrived. Jaden and Leah stood together in the same conference room they'd used a few weeks earlier, the one that had felt like a battlefield at the time. Now, it felt like a place of possibility. The table was set, their team ready for action, and their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had done the hard work. Sophia Carter from Techinnovate and Eric Grant were the first to arrive. Both looked a bit more relaxed than they had last time, but there was still that quiet intensity in the air. Jaden and Leah stood side by side as they kicked off the presentation. Jaden spoke first, his voice steady but full of purpose. "Thank you for giving us this chance to show you how far we've come. Over the past few weeks, we've made significant improvements to our system, ensuring that it works effectively on a large scale." Leah continued, diving into the specifics of the improvements they'd made, explaining the technical challenges they'd faced and how they'd solved them. They demonstrated how the system was now performing under stress and showed off the scalability improvements that had been integrated. "We're confident that we're ready for deployment," Leah concluded. "With the adjustments we've made, the system can now handle real-time, large-scale data processing, which is key for cities to adopt this technology on a wider scale." Sophia and Eric exchanged glances, nodding thoughtfully as they reviewed the data. There was a long pause, and Jaden's heart skipped a beat. Had they done enough? Would they be able to prove that this was more than just a concept? Finally, Sophia spoke. "Jaden, Leah, I have to say, I'm impressed. The improvements are exactly what we needed to see. I think we can move forward with the next phase. But we need to ensure that this solution is ready for global implementation. We'll need to start planning for deployment, scaling it to multiple cities." Jaden's heart soared. They had done it. They had passed the test. "We'll be ready," Jaden said, his voice filled with conviction. "We're not just ready to deploy, we're ready to lead the change." As the meeting wrapped up, Jaden and Leah exchanged a look of disbelief and triumph. They had made it through the hardest part, and the next phase of their journey was just beginning. But as they walked out of the conference room, side by side, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something even bigger. The road ahead would be challenging, no doubt, but now they were more determined than ever to face whatever came next. The final push had paid off. The first signs of success were small, yet unmistakable. After the presentation to Techinnovate, Jaden and Leah had received confirmation that they were moving forward to the next stage, the pilot program. But the weight of the upcoming challenge was beginning to settle in. It wasn't enough to simply convince Techinnovate that their technology worked in the lab. Now, they had to prove that it could scale in real-world environments, under the pressure of city-sized challenges. For Jaden, the excitement was tempered by the reality of what came next. They were no longer a startup with a promising prototype, they were on the verge of becoming the next big player in smart city technology. The stakes were higher, the pressure greater, and the path ahead was uncharted. The team had successfully integrated their solution into a controlled environment, but real-world testing was a completely different beast. The pilot program would be conducted in 3 major cities: Portland, Minneapolis, and Denver. These cities had been selected due to their existing interest in smart city technologies, but the integration was going to be a massive undertaking. Jaden and Leah knew they had to get it right. There would be no second chances. Leah was the first to bring up the elephant in the room during their team meeting the following morning. "Okay, everyone. We've got the backing of Techinnovate, and we've got the green light to launch the pilot program. But we're no longer in the realm of testing in isolation. This is the real deal. We've got cities depending on us now. The stakes just got a whole lot higher." The room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The team had worked tirelessly to get to this point, but now, the eyes of the world, or at least 3 cities, were on them. Every decision, every move, was under the microscope. Jaden leaned forward, his tone serious. I know we're all feeling the pressure, but we've proven that our tech works. We've fixed the issues with scalability, and the integrations are running smoother than ever. We've got the tools, the expertise, and the determination. Now, we just need to focus on executing flawlessly. He paused, making eye contact with each team member. We've been given a chance to change the way cities operate. To revolutionize urban living. Let's not waste it. The team nodded, a renewed sense of focus overtaking the room. They were no longer a small team of dreamers. They were a force, ready to make their mark. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jaden and Leah, along with their team, traveled to each of the cities to oversee the implementation of their technology. In Portland, they were tasked with helping the city's traffic management system become more efficient through their platform, using real-time data to reroute vehicles during peak hours. In Minneapolis, they integrated their technology with the city's energy grid, optimizing energy consumption across the region. Finally, in Denver, their system was used to manage waste collection and recycling, ensuring that resources were utilized more effectively. Each city presented its own unique challenges, but Jaden and Leah felt the adrenaline of knowing they were creating something monumental. They had their hands full, from working with local government officials to overcoming technical issues that cropped up unexpectedly, but they couldn't help but feel the excitement of being part of something bigger than themselves. During one of their visits to Portland, Jaden stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, his eyes scanning the streets below. The tech they had developed was already being put into action, traffic was moving more smoothly, and congestion had decreased significantly. It was working. Leah joined him, a smile on her face. This is it, Jaden. We're really doing it. This is just the beginning. Jaden nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. There was still a lingering doubt that he couldn't shake. What if it didn't work in every city? What if the solution that worked in Portland fell flat in Minneapolis or Denver? What if the system failed in ways they hadn't anticipated? He shook his head, trying to push the worry aside. We've tested everything. We've gone over it 1,000 times. This is our moment. Leah's eyes softened. I know, but I can tell you're still not fully convinced. Jaden, it's okay to have doubts. This is a big leap. But you have to trust the work we've done, trust the people we've got. We've all put everything into this. We're not backing down now. Jaden looked at her, appreciating her calm reassurance. She was right. They had done the work. Now it was time to let it unfold. They weren't in control of every outcome, but they had built something worth believing in. The pilot program was a success. In every city, the technology performed better than expected. Traffic flow improved, energy consumption became more efficient, and waste management systems became streamlined. The results weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they were tangible changes that impacted real people's lives for the better. Jaden and Leah were ecstatic, but they also knew that this was just the beginning. As the pilot program wrapped up, they received overwhelming feedback from city officials, local communities, and even the media. Their technology was already beginning to change the way cities operated, and everyone was watching. But with success came new challenges. The media coverage was ramping up, and soon, the world would know who Jaden and Leah were. The pressure to expand, to scale rapidly, was mounting. Investors began asking for their next steps, pushing for faster implementation in more cities, with more ambitious timelines. One night, as Jaden stared at his laptop in his hotel room in Denver, he received an email from Eric Grant at Horizon Ventures. The subject line read, "Scaling the Vision." He opened the email, which detailed a massive opportunity. Tech Innovate was looking to expand their partnership with Jaden's company. They wanted to roll out their technology nationwide, and possibly globally. Jaden's heart raced. This was it. This was the moment they had been working for. But there was one question that echoed in his mind, louder than all the excitement: were they ready? Leah found him sitting at the hotel desk, the glow of the screen illuminating his face. She walked in quietly, sensing something was off. "What's going on?" she asked, sitting next to him. Jaden turned the laptop toward her, showing her the email. "It's TechInnovate. They want to expand the partnership, nationwide. Maybe even global." Leah read the email, her eyes widening. "Wow. This is huge, Jaden." He nodded slowly, still processing the enormity of the request. "It is. But I don't know if we're ready. I mean, we've proven our tech works, but going global? That's a whole different ball game." Leah placed a hand on his shoulder. "We've come this far. We've made it through so many hurdles. If we wait until we're 100% sure we're ready, we'll never take the next step. We have to move forward, with the belief that we can do this. We have to believe in ourselves." Jaden looked at her, feeling a mix of fear and exhilaration. The road ahead would be difficult. It would be filled with unknowns, challenges, and mistakes. But they had always moved forward, and they had always found a way to overcome. He took a deep breath. They were ready. "Let's do it," he said, a smile creeping onto his face. "Let's take it to the next level." Jaden and Leah had just taken the leap. With the confirmation from TechInnovate, their vision was no longer a local success. It was set to become a global movement, a game-changing technology that could transform how cities across the world functioned. The promise was immense, but with it came an overwhelming new set of responsibilities. The weight of this new reality hit Jaden harder than he expected. As he and Leah sat in their office, reviewing the contract with TechInnovate, the excitement of the past few weeks began to settle into something more serious. They had been dreaming of this moment for so long, but now, it was real. And it was bigger than either of them had imagined. "We've made it," Leah said softly, her voice full of disbelief. She was staring at the contract on the table in front of her, her eyes scanning the terms. "We've officially taken the next step." Jaden leaned back in his chair, his hands running over his face. He was feeling the weight of it too. The possibilities were endless, but so were the challenges. The cities that had been a part of their pilot program were just the beginning. Now, they had to figure out how to scale, how to integrate their technology in a way that worked for entire continents. The idea of deploying in other countries, with their unique challenges and demands, seemed like a task they had barely begun to grasp. "We've always been able to handle everything, one step at a time," Jaden said, trying to sound confident. "But now, the scale is changing. We'll need new teams, new strategies, new partnerships. It's not just about improving traffic or energy in one city anymore. We need to be able to replicate this system in different climates, with varying populations, and, in some cases, in completely different regulatory environments." Leah nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was saying. "Right. It's a whole new ball game. But we've already demonstrated that we can make this work. We just need to be smart about it. I think it's time we start looking into new talent. We'll need experts in international law, operations, and scaling tech. Plus, we need to ensure that our platform is customizable enough for different regions. What works in Portland might not work in Tokyo or London." Jaden agreed, rubbing his temples. "That's where I'm stuck. There are so many pieces to this puzzle, and we can't afford to make mistakes. One wrong move and it could ruin everything we've worked for." Leah's tone was calm and reassuring. "We've gotten this far by taking risks and adapting quickly. We're going to do the same here. But we're going to build it the right way. We'll have a strong foundation in place before we go global." The next few weeks were spent building out that foundation. They expanded their team, hiring experts from various fields to help with their international strategy. They brought on consultants with deep knowledge of global markets, who helped them understand the intricacies of entering new countries. They also expanded their tech team, creating subteams dedicated to different aspects of the scaling process. The team members who had helped them get this far were now tasked with breaking down each of the regions they were about to expand into. But even with all the new hires and planning, the challenges continued to mount. Each new city brought its own set of complications. In some countries, they had to navigate complex government regulations; in others, they had to deal with a lack of infrastructure that could support their technology. They also had to ensure their platform was adaptable. It needed to work in various languages, accommodate different currency systems, and align with diverse cultural expectations. The days were long, and Jaden could feel the pressure mounting with each passing hour. The weight of the company's future rested on their ability to handle this scale-up. Every decision mattered. One day, as Jaden and Leah sat in their office, going over the expansion plans, they were interrupted by a phone call. It was Sophia Carter from TechInnovate, and from the moment Jaden picked up the phone, he knew it wasn't going to be an easy conversation. "Jaden, Leah," Sophia's voice was steady but tinged with urgency. "We've just been notified that one of our competitors, Smart Grid Solutions, is preparing to launch a similar platform. They've already partnered with several governments across Europe and Asia. They're moving fast. We've got to step up our game." Leah's face went pale, but Jaden's eyes narrowed, his mind already racing through potential responses. "What does this mean for us?" he asked, his voice steady. "It means that you've got to speed up your timeline. They're going to be coming after your market share in these regions, and we can't afford to lose our momentum. We need to accelerate the launch in every city you're targeting." Yesterday, Jaden felt a cold rush of determination wash over him. Competition was inevitable, but this was different. This wasn't just about proving their technology anymore. It was about surviving in the race. They couldn't afford to sit back and wait for things to unfold. If they did, they might lose everything. "We'll get it done," Jaden said, his voice firm. "We'll double our efforts. Thanks for the heads up." As he hung up the phone, Leah looked at him, her expression serious. "This just got a whole lot harder." Jaden ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. "We knew it wouldn't be easy. But now it's a race, and we have to win." Over the next few weeks, Jaden and Leah pushed their team harder than ever before. They ramped up their efforts, building out infrastructure and working around the clock to ensure that every region they were entering was prepared for the technology. They were in constant contact with local governments, fine-tuning their approach for each area. They streamlined their operations and focused on improving every aspect of the technology. But even as the weeks passed, there were moments where it felt like they were falling behind. The market was moving quickly, and every time they hit a milestone, it felt like their competitors were right behind them. Jaden and Leah had no time to lose, and every decision they made now felt like a potential turning point. The pressure was immense, and every failure, no matter how small, felt like a setback. It wasn't until one late night in their office that they saw the first glimmer of hope. Jaden sat in his chair, staring at his laptop screen, as he reviewed the latest data from their pilot cities. Traffic congestion was down by 20% in Portland, energy efficiency had increased by 15% in Minneapolis, and Denver had seen a 10% reduction in waste collection costs. The data was real, and it spoke volumes. The system was working, and it was working well. Leah walked in, her tired eyes lighting up as she saw the results. "We did it," she said, her voice full of disbelief. "This is it. This is our moment." Jaden looked at the data, then at Leah. "We're going to win this, Leah. We're going to change the world." The tension in the air was palpable as Jaden and Leah sat in the conference room, staring at the final report from their latest test markets. The data was positive, but there was an undeniable feeling that they were standing on the edge of a precipice. The pilot cities had shown promise, but the next phase would determine if they were truly capable of sustaining their momentum on a global scale. "Leah, look at this," Jaden said, pointing to the dashboard on his laptop. "The traffic management system is more efficient, but we still have major hurdles when it comes to waste management. It's harder to integrate in certain regions than we thought. Leah leaned in, examining the screen with a furrowed brow. She bit her lip, clearly troubled. It's like we're making progress in some places, but falling behind in others. We need to figure out how to solve these gaps. Otherwise, we risk jeopardizing everything we've worked for. Jaden exhaled sharply, his fingers drumming on the table. The weight of the situation was settling in. Tech Innovate had given them the green light, but the window of opportunity was closing fast. Smart Grid Solutions wasn't sitting idly by, and with each passing day, their competitors were closing the gap. The stakes were higher now than they'd ever been. It wasn't just about innovation, it was about survival in a world that moved at the speed of technology. Leah pushed back her chair and stood up. We can't let this slip away. We've come too far. We need to think bigger. We need a solution that adapts instantly. Not just regionally, but globally. If we can get the adaptability piece right, then we can truly be leaders in this space. Jaden looked at her, his eyes narrowing with a mix of exhaustion and determination. What do you have in mind? Leah's eyes sparkled with a rare kind of intensity. We've been working on a universal interface for our tech. It's designed to bridge gaps, to allow our system to adjust dynamically to each city's unique challenges. But we need to take it a step further. We need a live feedback system. Real-time data from users in every city, constantly optimizing the platform. Jaden leaned forward, the idea taking root in his mind. So you're suggesting we integrate a crowdsourced approach to help our system evolve as it's used? Leah nodded. Exactly. If our tech learns from real-world data in real time, we can adapt on the fly. Not just to traffic patterns, but to how people are interacting with the platform, how cities are responding to it. If we can make it self-adjusting, we'll have the flexibility to scale without being tied to each region's limitations. It was an ambitious idea, one that would take their technology to the next level, but it also posed its own set of risks. Real-time adaptation would require constant monitoring, rapid problem-solving, and an infrastructure that could handle unpredictable demands. Jaden rubbed his chin. This is huge. But we'll need to bring in a whole new team to make this work, engineers, data scientists, UX designers. We're talking about a global ecosystem. Can we handle that kind of scope? Leah smiled, though it was a bit weary. I think we can. We've already proven we can move fast and scale efficiently. This would just be a natural evolution of what we've built. Jaden stood, pacing around the room. It felt like they were at a turning point, a crossroads between their ambition and the practical realities of scaling. The future was in their hands, but the next few moves would determine whether they would stay ahead of the competition or falter under the weight of their own ambitions. All right, Jaden said, his voice firm. We move forward. Let's bring in the right people. Let's build this live feedback system. We can't afford to wait for perfection, we need to launch now and refine as we go. With the decision made, Jaden and Leah set the plan in motion. They were no longer just a small tech company with a prototype. They were on the verge of changing how cities functioned worldwide, and that meant facing their fears head-on. As they began recruiting top-tier engineers, data scientists, and experts in machine learning, the pressure continued to mount. Tech Innovate's investors were breathing down their necks, pushing for rapid progress. The team worked tirelessly, but with every success came new challenges. The competition from Smart Grid Solutions was relentless, their systems were being tested in more cities, and their PR campaign was gaining traction. The race was on. Jaden spent late nights strategizing, collaborating with Leah, and refining their technology. It became clear that to stay ahead, they needed to evolve faster than anyone expected. Every new city they entered posed new problems, but each problem presented a new opportunity to adapt and learn. As the system collected real-time data from the cities they were working in, it began to adjust to local needs. Traffic in Portland improved even further, energy efficiency in Minneapolis jumped by another 5%, and waste management in Denver was operating at near optimal levels. But the biggest breakthrough came when they tested the real-time feedback system. They launched a beta version, where users could interact with the platform, providing feedback and suggestions that would immediately influence the technology's next iteration. The feedback was overwhelming, with users offering insights that the team never could have predicted. "This is it," Jaden, Leah said after reviewing the data. "We're getting insights in real time. The system is evolving, and it's getting better every day. We've done it." But Jaden knew that the battle was far from over. The next challenge was coming, and it wasn't just about refining their tech. It was about going global. The data was there, the system was working, but they needed to execute flawlessly on the international stage. Could they handle the cultural, political, and logistical differences across continents? Could they continue innovating without losing sight of their original vision? The day of the international launch arrived, and the tension was palpable. Jaden, Leah, and the team gathered in the conference room, their eyes glued to the live feeds from the cities they were launching in. Their platform was being deployed across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, three vastly different regions with their own set of challenges. "Everything's in place," Leah said, checking the monitors. "The feedback system is live. The infrastructure is ready. Now, we just wait." Jaden stood silently, watching as the first cities began to roll out the technology. The real-time data started flooding in, traffic patterns, energy consumption, waste management, it was all coming together. For the first time in weeks, Jaden felt a sense of relief. Their system was doing exactly what they had hoped for. It was adapting, learning, and most importantly, it was scalable. But as the hours passed, Jaden's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Sophia Carter at TechInnovate. The subject read, "Urgent, competition has launched a counterattack." Jaden's heart sank. They had anticipated challenges, but this was more than a challenge, it was a declaration of war from Smart Grid Solutions. The message outlined a new, advanced version of their competitor's platform, promising immediate integration with 50 cities across Europe. The stakes had never been higher. The message from Sophia Carter hit Jaden like a cold slap. Smart Grid Solutions had taken their best shot, launching a counter-platform that promised seamless integration into 50 major cities across Europe. They had responded to Jaden and Leah's progress with a direct attack, a platform that not only mimicked their core technology but also added new features designed to make it more adaptable and user-friendly. "We can't sit back anymore," Jaden said, his voice a mixture of frustration and determination as he stared at the email. Leah was pacing beside him, equally tense. "I don't get it," Leah muttered, her eyes scanning the message. "This isn't just a regular update. This is a full-scale war. They're trying to push us out before we can get established." Jaden gripped his phone tightly. "They've done their homework. They know we're targeting the same cities, the same regions. We can't afford to play catch-up. We need to leapfrog them." Leah looked up at him, her expression sharp. "How? What do we do now?" Jaden exhaled, his mind racing. He knew they had one shot, a final push to establish their dominance in this race. It wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about brand loyalty, innovation, and creating a solution so compelling that even Smart Grid's biggest clients couldn't afford to ignore it. "We need to make a move that no one expects," Jaden said, a fire igniting in his chest. "We've got the real-time feedback system. We've got the adaptability that no one else has. What we need now is a game-changing feature that will leave Smart Grid scrambling." Leah stopped pacing and faced him. "A game-changer, huh?" "Yeah," Jaden said with a nod. "Something that solves not just traffic, energy, and waste, but all of those in a single, seamless experience. I'm talking about sustainability, not just efficiency. We need to integrate green technology with everything we've done so far." Leah raised an eyebrow. "Like what, exactly?" Imagine if every smart city we roll out can also reduce its carbon footprint in real time. We integrate renewable energy sources, like solar and wind, directly into the platform's algorithms. The cities won't just save money, they'll also reduce their environmental impact in ways that no one else is doing. Leah's eyes lit up. You're saying we make every city not just smarter, but also greener. That's huge. It's not just a feature, it's a movement. Jaden nodded. Exactly. We'll position ourselves as the pioneers of sustainable smart cities. We'll show the world that technology isn't just about convenience or profit. It's about creating a better future for everyone. And that will give us an edge smart grid can't touch. Over the next few days, Jaden and Leah worked tirelessly to develop a strategy to integrate sustainability into their platform. They pulled in experts from the environmental sector, partnering with renewable energy companies and sustainability advocates. Together, they mapped out a plan to bring clean energy solutions directly into the heart of their technology. They called it Green Fusion. Green Fusion was a real-time adaptive system that not only managed a city's infrastructure but also prioritized the integration of renewable energy. It allowed cities to dynamically shift between traditional and sustainable energy sources based on demand, weather conditions, and availability. The system would optimize energy use, reduce waste, and even allow cities to track their carbon footprints in real time. It was designed to complement the core features of their platform, traffic, energy, and waste management, and add an entirely new layer of sustainability. We're not just building a smart city, Jaden said, looking at Leah after their final pitch. We're building a green future. Leah nodded, her face filled with pride. This is the kind of innovation that could change everything. The team worked around the clock to implement the Green Fusion system. It was a massive undertaking, but they were driven by the urgency of their situation. If they didn't act quickly, Smart Grid's counter-platform would gain too much ground. They focused their efforts on 3 major cities for the initial rollout: Portland, Berlin, and Tokyo. These cities had already been a part of their pilot program, and they knew they had the infrastructure in place to test Green Fusion. The team coordinated with local governments, energy providers, and environmental groups to ensure that the integration would run smoothly. The first 24 hours after the launch were a blur. Data came in from every angle. Traffic was reduced, energy efficiency was up, and cities were already seeing a significant reduction in their carbon footprints. The real-time data feedback was overwhelming. The cities were adjusting on their own, thanks to Green Fusion's dynamic algorithms. But the most striking part? The global reaction. As news spread about the green revolution happening in these cities, people took notice. Journalists covered the launch extensively, and environmental groups hailed the initiative as a breakthrough in sustainable urban development. Within days, tech blogs were calling it the next evolution in smart cities. The tagline for the new system was simple, but powerful: smarter, greener, better. And just like that, the tides began to turn. Smart Grid Solutions wasn't about to let Jaden and Leah's innovation go unanswered. Within a week, the company announced their own green initiative, an energy efficiency program that was also designed to reduce carbon emissions. But it was clear that their solution didn't go far enough. Their technology wasn't integrated. It wasn't dynamic. It was a reactive system, while Green Fusion was proactive. And that was where Jaden and Leah had the edge. They weren't just responding to the problems cities faced, they were anticipating them and adjusting the platform in real time. It wasn't long before governments, businesses, and citizens began to see the difference. Cities using Green Fusion saw dramatic improvements in air quality, energy consumption, and overall livability. People were invested in the future that Jaden and Leah were creating, and it wasn't just about smart cities anymore. It was about smart, green cities. As Green Fusion continued to roll out across the globe, Jaden and Leah stood at the edge of something immense. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had their vision. They had successfully proven that they could adapt, overcome obstacles, and create lasting change. They received an invitation to the Global Smart Cities Summit in Dubai, where leaders from around the world would gather to discuss the future of urban development. It was a prestigious event, and an opportunity to showcase everything they had worked for. Jaden and Leah knew that this would be their final test. If they could secure support from the global community, from governments, investors, and tech giants, they would secure their place in the future of smart cities. Jaden glanced over at Leah as they boarded their flight. "We're about to change the world. Are you ready?" Leah smiled, her eyes filled with excitement and pride. "Always. Let's do this." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?